the Dent Slayer, Matt Boyette. Thank you so much for being here.
She's smooth, boy.
So I took a poll of a little group chat that we're in. Said, hey guys, do you all get tired of military boot camp stories? Because sometimes they can be just repetitive and a little bit much, but a lot of guys were like, no, we love that kind of thing. So I'm going to tell a story from a boot camp. So I was in the military, in the Marine Corps. I went in 2001. And so boot camp is funny things happen because you're just in a situation that you've never experienced before. And it's just high pressure and people just do weird things. And the situation's very weird. Okay. So you take a shower. I mean, this is kind of crazy, but you take a shower in a room with a bunch of other guys, and the shower room, basically think about a big rectangle with one way in, one way out. You kind of go in the middle of one of the long walls and you can go around it and come out. And there's probably 6 shower heads in there. Maybe 2 of them are properly functioning to where you can get a level of warmth that feels decent to the human body. A couple of them are all cold, and then a couple of them are all scalding hot. Okay. And then when you basically have 1 minute to shower, and there's not enough shower heads. So you're sharing a shower head with another dude, and you're kind of taking turns getting under the water. You kind of soap up and wash while the other guy's in the water, and you kind of swap out. And then you might be on a cold, all cold or an all hot, but maybe you made it in there first to get to a warm one. But so that's like your normal shower situation, and they're just yelling at you the whole time. But you also shower after you do an official PT session. They make you come back in and take a PT shower. So these showers are different. What you do is everyone gets in a line, and there's like 80 to 90 guys in this living in one big bay. And so everybody, you kind of line either side of the big, huge squad bay, and everybody takes, changes out of their clothes and puts a towel on. So everybody's just standing there with a towel. And in like a big circle, you march into the showers and just walk around the perimeter of the showers and walk out. And once you go in, you kind of take your towel off, hold it in the middle so your towel doesn't get wet, and you just walk through the showers, the hot, the cold, the warm. And then you walk out and you're just like kind of wet. You're not clean, but now you're showered.
Okay.
So, and during this process, they're yelling at you, pushing you. So you can imagine you're in a line of 80 dudes basically naked with a towel, and they're pushing you in. So you're pushing against each other. It is weird. But it's not too weird because everybody's miserable, and so it's just not, But they're pushing us through, and in a crowd, you kind of you can't hardly do anything. So they had these steel soap dishes on the wall. Have I ever told you this one?
No.
And I get pushed into this steel soap dish, and it busts my head open. So, boom, hit my head, and blood, just like leaking like a pig. And so I'm bleeding. Guys are putting their towels on my head to stop the bleeding. It's crazy.
Oh God.
So, other naked dudes are like rendering first aid to me. Anyways, okay, so they send me to, the medical place, and they give me staples in my head. And this is kind of early on, so everybody's head's still shaved. You don't have like a high and tight haircut yet. It's just shaved. So I have staples in my head, and then a big 6x6 gauze taped to my head. White, big pad taped to my head.
Okay.
All right. So my drill instructors, they know what happened, whatever. But I'm walking around with this big thing on my head, and you would go into like the chow hall. When you're outside my cover would kind of cover it up to hide it. You go into the chow hall, you have all these other platoons with their drill instructors, and anything that stands out like just draws them like a magnet. And so every time we would go into some building where there were other drill instructors, they would all just be drawn to me and say all kinds of, the worst things to you.
Yeah.
But you know what they're doing, and you're kind of like trying to laugh it off. But they're saying the most vulgar things, back when it was still part of the culture to.
When they were allowed to say it.
Yes. But it's kind of, when it happens to other people, it's funny. But when you're the subject, it's tough.
Yeah.
So that was, that was an experience. But at that time where I had that thing on my head, I couldn't participate like in certain training things because I would be participating, my head would just start bleeding. So they're like, "Hey, you got to sit out. Your head's bleeding." So we had this training thing where it was some kind of martial arts thing or like pugil sticks or some kind of fighting thing where you were hat off in the sun all day, and I couldn't do it because I had that big pad on my head. And so I didn't do that training evolution, and all these guys with the bald heads out in the sun all day that day, probably like half of the platoon, it burnt the tops of their heads from being out in the sun, and it like scabbed over the tops of their heads.
Okay.
Nasty. So bad that like the following week was like pool training, or like swimmer qualification, and a lot of them couldn't participate because they basically had open scab on their body. And so like I was able to avoid the total head scab situation because of that injury. But it was one of the nastiest things I've ever seen. These guys just with a complete scab on top of their head.
That's crazy.
Nasty. Yes.
Sometimes there's blessings that are beneath, some struggle, and yeah.
Yes.
You didn't think having that those staples in your head were going to end up being a blessing, but it's kind of life.
It worked out.
That happens in life more than you realize.
So you had to do the swimming evolution?
Yes, it was healed by then,
Okay.
But some of the guys' scabs weren't healed by then.
So if you didn't do one of those evolutions, would you have to go back through it at another point to do those?
Certain ones.
Okay.
The swimming thing, you had to pass it, or you would get recycled to the platoon or the people behind you and pick up with them.
Wow.
Yeah. So
Lucky you.
I know. But like when the drill instructors would swarm me and ask me what happened, what's wrong with you? What happened to your head? As soon as they heard it happen in the shower, it was over.
Yeah. You told me you dropped the soap.
That's what it went. It totally went to that. It was, it's chaos.
Nice.
Okay. So today's guest is the owner of Kiko. Since 2004, he's 53 years old, husband to Jennifer for the past 28 years. He's got 3 kids, Emma, Hayden, and Kale. Welcome to the show, Chris White.
Hey guys, thanks so much. Yeah, this is a cool setup you've got here.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, I love sitting and talking with you, Matt. Like when you said, "Hey, would you want to come do this?" It's just a matter of absolutely yes, just a matter of when and how we could work that out. Because literally, I think we could sit and talk for hours and hours on end.
We probably could. So we did. If we kind of go back to the inception of this, the interview specifically, but the show, this all kind of came from Italy. You and I were in Italy last year. We went to the DB Expo, and that was the first time I met you. I think we just met in passing. Our booths were kind of by each other, and in one of the lulls of people, he came over. We were talking, and we met, and kind of hit it off a little bit. And then, man, those expos, those are just crazy floods of people, and you get socially exhausted in those. And I got asked to go to pizza that night. I forget what night it was, with like 20 or 30 people. And I'm like, no, it's the last thing I want to do. No offense, but last thing I want to do is go to eat pizza with 20 or 30 more guys and prolong this thing. And so me and my wife went with me that year, and we were looking for this little cafe that we could just sit down and eat dinner and just like, what do they call it? Off gas.
Yeah.
And just like
Not talk.
Right.
And so we walk in this little cafe, and Chris was there sitting there by himself, and I think we made eye contact, and it was like, no, come on up. And so we sat down, me and my wife sat down with him, and we sat there for, I want to say, at least 2 hours. It might have been longer, but we just had this really, really good conversation that I would have never otherwise had. I would never otherwise known some of these things about him unless we had that conversation. And I left there like really impressed. I mean, with you, of course, but really impressed with the idea of replicating that. Like, man, that was really cool. How do we? I want more of this kind of thing. And so that's where the idea of a podcast came from. And I mean, there's other podcasts out that do the Zoom type, where they're shorter, and I wanted to replicate that dining experience as much as possible, where you don't have interruptions, you don't have anything outside influences, your phone is not really a factor, and you can just sit down and have a really, really good, thorough, intimate conversation. And so
That's awesome. What time is the Italian food coming in? Because that food was good.
that was good, and I'm so glad I did not go for the pizza that night. It was such a weird little restaurant too, because it was almost like a little house that they converted into a restaurant. Yeah. I mean, I guess space is a thing there in this really tight little village, and so you had to weave through these little. It wasn't like a Olive Garden here or these huge things. It was just this little tiny.
You can't get a bad glass of wine. The wine is incredible, yeah, and the food is incredible. Like whether it is pizza or whether it's the pastas, it's just amazing, really.
Yeah, it was good. And so we're going back this year. I think James is going with me this year, and we're going to go back to the expo, and it's supposed to be in another different facility, which is supposed to be nicer or more bougie, let's just say. So I'm looking forward to that. So yeah.
What town was that place in that y'all were talking?
Treviglio.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's where it was. Yeah, which was not too far outside of Milan, but this year it's much closer to Lake Como. So again, like that's the George Clooney land and all that, right? With like
destination place. Yeah. We were in just a little city, little suburb city, like nothing's special per se about the city, but other than it's just daintiness and uniqueness, it was just really cool. And I think I stayed. It was like a 15-minute walk from where I stayed in our hotel to where the convention was, and so we walked every day to the convention, and in the morning and the evenings, and you get to walk through this, literally a village like you would see on any Italian spy movie or something, where they're driving these little cars through these little alleys. It was that, and you're walking through there every day, and very unique, very cool, and it wasn't a real touristy place either. That was what was cool. Like it was very kind of local, and so I mean, I kind of stood out, and it was like, who are these people in our little village? But I mean, they were welcoming. They weren't rude, but it was very cool. It was very quaint, and
that's what I've found to be one of the coolest things about traveling to do business. Is that we've been traveling to do business internationally for a number of years now, but it's that process of it becoming cultural immersion versus tourists, right? Because if you're going to do business and then you're going to look around while you're doing business, which is what I've been doing, you get this opportunity to experience the culture in a way that you wouldn't if you just were hitting all the tourist trap spots.
Yeah.
So like that's what is, if you're in America and you're listening to this and you're thinking about, well, why, if I'm a PDR tech and, somewhere in the States, why would I go to Italy? It's not to go to Italy to see all the hot spots. It's to go to experience the culture, because you're going to find technicians that are just like you, that just happen to live in some small town in Italy, right? So that I think that's one of the coolest things about it.
I would go to Australia, not to beat this. I talk about Australia every episode, but it did have a huge impact on me. But one thing that I loved about going to Australia is that I'd go there, and I'm not going there as a tourist. I'm going there long term to work for at least 4 months. It was about a 4-month commitment for me to go. And, about week 2, you're done with the touristy stuff. You've kind of seen everything per se. You've kind of
Right.
And then the rest of the time, you're just existing there like a resident. You're doing laundry, you're grocery shopping, you're trying to assimilate into the culture, and you really get a different perspective than when you just kind of glaze the surface with you go to the Opera House, go to Bondi Beach, you go to all these cool places, and you're not really experiencing that area. I mean, you're experiencing to a level, I guess, but like there's a different layer that you have to somehow break into, that just being there for an extended period of time definitely gets you. But also, maybe going to like an obscure place where it's not the typical touristy places, because they're gonna, you're just a fish in the trap when you go to those places. I mean, they've built everything around the tourists, and so the food's going to be different. The appeals are going to be different than the small little quaint little places that's just people living, man.
Built around the residents.
Built around the residents. So that was a really cool time. So so here we are now. We have Chris here, and we talked about that was almost a year ago, and we talked about having you on the podcast, and it was obviously a conflict of scheduling, and so you made it happen, and I thank you very much for doing that. I know you're a very busy man, and I appreciate you greatly taking the time to come here and to be a part of this. We're excited about this podcast. We're excited about being able to interview guys like you, but also like documenting some of this. I think we as an industry are pretty small. Short-lived industry. We haven't had a huge lifespan thus far, and there's a lot of great people who are part of this industry that we want to archive who they are and their stories, and a lot of how we got here as an industry. Kiko is huge for our industry. I mean, they are, I would say you're and help me here, off the cuff, I would say you're probably the largest PDR tool company on the planet. Would that be close?
I guess I haven't stopped it. We'd be among them for sure.
You'd be among them.
Yeah.
I don't want to.
I would say, as a manufacturer, for sure, right? I don't know what anyone else's revenue is, but I think as a manufacturer, vertically integrated to selling tools, I don't know that there would, I would be, I guess, surprised if there was someone, if there's someone larger than us in that space. I wouldn't know it. That manufactures. When it comes to like revenue wise, I don't know what like an Anson's revenue is. But like clearly they sell a lot of tools. Of a lot of different folks. And so that revenue might be pretty significant.
But you've had a very long span too. As far as like going back even into my PDR journey. I was introduced to you guys pretty early, and you guys have had a long go at it thus far. And I would say, if you're a technician who has had your head out of the sand for any amount of time, then Kiko has definitely come across his tool card in some level. Obviously, probably initially with tabs. Now we're getting into some other stuff, but you guys have been making glue tabs for our industry, and can you?
Yeah, since 2009.
Since 2009.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I can tell you a little bit about how that got started.
Let's go way back.
Okay.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in southeast Kansas, a little town outside of a little town called Mound City, Kansas. Mound City, Kansas has a population of about 800 people. I grew up on a farm outside of Mound City, and so I am the youngest of 10 children. My mom and dad were both married before. My mom had 2 daughters. My dad had a daughter and 2 sons. When they married, they had 5 of us, and I'm the last.
That's awesome.
I'm the last of all 10, right? You know,
Wow.
and so I've got brothers and sisters. Everybody's, you know, my mom and dad are both gone, but my siblings are all, a bunch of them are old enough to be my parent, basically, right? You know, but they're all still doing pretty good. And you know, it's growing up on a farm. You know, I would say that at an early age, when I learned what being an entrepreneur was, when I learned what that, you know, the definition of that word, that's what I wanted to be. I'd say I was 9 or 10 years old. I had a brother-in-law at the time, you know, that had his own business, and I thought that was the coolest thing ever. And I thought, okay, that's what I want to do. I want to have my own business. But
Was the farm like a working farm? Is that their income, or?
no, not really. I mean, we had, you know, we had land. We had maybe a few cows. We had, you know, a few acres of farmland, but that was leased out to someone else. My dad actually worked for the gas service company in Kansas City, so he spent his weeks away from the farm, basically, and he was home on the weekends, you know, for the most part. So he had a job outside of that. It's just, I think we ended up there largely because my dad, you know, had so much respect for his grandparents, and they came from the farm. Basically, he had lived most of his life in Kansas City. I was born in Kansas City. Most of my siblings, you know, grew up mostly in Kansas City, but it was Dad's dream to have a farm. So he, you know, scraped together enough money to buy this 160-acre farm, and then we moved down there when I was like 5 years old. You know, my nearest brother was 4 years older, and you know that's where I grew up, and then moved into college at Pittsburgh State, Pittsburgh, Kansas. You know, I was thinking about that. You know, you're talking about that shower story. I spent a lot of time in football locker rooms taking showers, but ours were like pedestal in the middle, right?
Yes.
Yes, the pedestal in the middle, and now
yes,
you're like,
I've been at the.
you know,
You're looking
instead
at
of-
each other.
Yeah, you're looking at each other.
It's so bad.
Oh, it's so terrible.
Yes.
Like, ew. Oh God, those are you know that.
How do we
maybe
how do we
there was
engineer this
there's
to be the
maybe one or
weirdest
two guys
thing?
with a lot of confidence, but most of us didn't have that much confidence, you know, in that scenario. Yeah, golly.
Especially as a teenager. That is, yeah.
I can 100% say I've never showered with another man. Well,
It's not
Yeah,
something
100%
you should pursue.
No. Oh God, it's so funny. But yeah, so then you know, went to college, Pittsburgh State, and played football there. But again, with this idea that I want to have my own business, but you know, more of I'm not a riverboat gambler. I'm a, you know, a little bit of a calculated, you know, risk taker. I'll take risk, but it's calculated. And so I did not want. I started as a business major. And then, you know, you just talk to people and you know, you start talking to other business majors that are 2 or 3 years older, and you start talking to people who are, you know, looking to find their first job, and it's a little bit hard as just a general business major to get started. And so that school that I went to, Pittsburgh State in Pittsburgh, Kansas, was at the time one of only 3 or 4 schools in the nation that had a plastics engineering program. And I looked around and I thought, okay, there's a lot of things made out of plastic. You know, this, you know, engineering program has 100% job placement. Why wouldn't I just start here and then work my way, you know, toward my dream of having my own business? And so, you know, again, that's kind of the way my mind works, is that I might have a goal in mind. I'm willing to take some risk, but I'm going to try to hedge that risk, you know, by saying, all right, you know, let me start as an engineer, even though I didn't really desire to be an engineer. I don't think I have like the greatest engineering mind, although I can do it, you know. But then that allowed me to get started with my first job at Kiko, you know, which is now the company that I own. And basically, you know, as a graduate of that plastics engineering program, there were not very many plastics jobs, without going to the East Coast or up near Michigan and automotive, alley, type jobs. And so funny thing is there was like a job board, so this was, this is 1994. I mean, if, maybe Al Gore had, created the internet by then, I think,
Barely.
yeah. But yeah, we didn't have any experience with it at all. There was no internet at all. Any kind of job that was available was on a bulletin board. Like, that if somebody had a job that was available, they'd call the instructors, and, the instructor might write out and he'd post that job. And so Kiko, this job for an entry-level engineer got posted, and it said, okay, here's the address to mail your resume. And I looked at that and I thought, man, everybody's going to want this job because it's like 4 hours down the road. And I thought, all right, I know what I'm going to do. And so I found the yellow pages, and I found the phone number because there wasn't a phone number at all. I found the phone number and I called the guy and I said, hey, do you happen to have a fax machine? And he's like, yep, I've got a fax machine. And so he gave me the number. I faxed my resume. He called me back within a couple of hours. And then I was down, for the interview, got offered the job and accepted the job before anybody else's resume showed up. So that's how I got my first job at Kiko.
Out hustled everybody.
I mean,
that's awesome.
You just have to sometimes. Right?
No, that's great. I love that.
Where is the University of Pittsburgh? Because I just assumed Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Well, it's in Kansas.
In Kansas.
Yeah, Pittsburgh, Kansas. You got to drop the H. So it's it ends in G. Yeah. So it's Pittsburgh, Kansas, which is not far from Joplin, Missouri. If you know where that is.
I've heard of it.
Yeah. So about 4 hours from Oklahoma City. So it was an easy drive, to get started. And basically Kiko was at that time had begun as a plastics manufacturing company, injection molding, a contract manufacturing company, if you will, making plastic components for other people's products. Kiko did none of its own products at all.
Do you know when Kiko started?
1963.
Wow.
Yeah. So we're over 60. 60. There'd be 62 years this year.
Wow. Amazing.
Yeah. When we got to 60 years a couple of years ago, both the governor of Oklahoma and the mayor of Oklahoma City gave us a nice plaque for being in business that long. But anyway, it was a cool place to get started. It was it was about a 20,000 square foot facility at that time. There was 20 something employees, running 3 shifts, 24 hours a day, making parts for other people's products. The guy who hired me had his son, who was 10 years older than me, and his daughter that was about 12, 13 years older than me in the office, and then me. I just had a lot of energy. So there was just, he would give me things to do and I would do them and I'd be like, I'm bored, And
so as an engineer, what exactly are you doing?
Yeah. So, that's a funny thing. Like, he hired me thinking he needed some help, but he didn't really have things in mind for me to do. So I had to, he would give me like little things to calculate, if we were going to quote this part, rather than, we didn't have CAD systems back then. So I'd be taking drawings and I would be trying to create, calculations to figure out the volume of plastic that was in this so that, we can quote it properly, right? So things that like the CAD system does automatically, that was my job, in 1994, right? So anyway, and so I would do those, but there was just not enough to do. And I said, listen, can I go out and help the guys in the plant? And he's like, well, you work in the office. I'm like, well, I want to understand better, right? Like we were talking earlier about dents and how we, like if I can't understand it, then I'm not comfortable,
Sure.
And so the more I can understand things, I can gain a lot of confidence. And so you create understanding, or I create by immersion, right? And so I needed to be out in that plant. I needed to be putting those molds in machines and figuring out how those machines operated to be able to have the confidence to be able to grow and hopefully, help run the business. And that's basically what happened is, by the year 2000, so 6 years after I was there, he made me general manager of the entire business. And,
Wow.
he offered me that opportunity. And I said, listen, because he knew by then I'd been as respectful as I could always be, because again, like this guy given me in my start, he'd given me opportunities to grow, but I always was, I don't know if it was cocky or whether it was, hopefully it was just quiet confidence to say, listen, I'm going to have my own business someday, right? I mean, whether it's a business that, hopefully it's not a business that competes against you, but I won't work for someone else, my whole life, I feel like when I say that, it sounds like rude or arrogant, but it wasn't, because
Did you tell him that right off the bat, or how long were you with them until you communicated that?
I mean, within the first couple of years.
Yeah.
Yeah, within the first couple of years, it's just because it was in my fiber. It's just who I wanted to be, and so I think that's what made him say, listen, and hopefully some ability. He was like, well, I'd like you to run our business, and I said, okay, I'm happy to do that, but only if your son and your daughter are okay with it. Like, I will go somewhere else, because like this is a family business. And so, and he said, well, it's not about them. I'm offering you this job. And I said, well, with all due respect, thank you, but I'm not going to take this job without talking individually to your son and your daughter. And I went to the daughter first, and she said, well, this is amazing because I never want to work for my brother, and I know Dad won't give me the job. So she was in 100%. Like, and she would have been more capable than her brother, honestly, right? And then when I went and talked to her brother, who again, they were 10, 12 years older than me. When I went and talked to him, I could see the disappointment on his face. But yet, he understood. He said, listen, like, this is the right thing for the business. And, so I really have a lot of respect for them and their family. And, and so as I've had my own business, that's one of the things that, man, that's, we could talk for hours about. I now have, 2 of my 3 children working with us, right? Not management jobs, but, important jobs to the business. But man, what a challenge that is to think about, what's the best thing for a business,
Sure.
And what's the best thing for a family, and trying to meld those 2 things together. That's a whole nother podcast almost, right? But anyway, for me, that was allowed me the opportunity to then, start growing the business, because now he's more or less, he's still there, but he tossed me the keys, right? And so we did some things to help grow the business, and found some additional business from one of our key customers, and then I started pushing him with the fact that, like, well, this is great, I mean, within a year or 2 of having, the job and being able, now I could understand that, yeah, I know how to run this business. And now I had, truthfully, like at that point, I knew I could run that business. I had no idea whether I had no confidence to run any other business, and like it now I know business is business, and that, as long as you immerse yourself and get your feet on the ground and like, don't you're not too overconfident that like business principles, but like at that stage, like I knew I could run that business.
Yeah.
And so I kind of wanted that business, but I was willing to leave if I needed to. And basically he was like, well, let's just work on, because at that point he was mid to late 60s and he was wanting to, retire, move on at some point. And so 2004, we struck a deal that was largely owner carry that, put me in the seat of being the owner for the first time of the business. And so, signed a bunch of papers, and all of a sudden between him and the bank, I owed about $5 million, right? And had, so my net worth was about negative $4.9 million, right? So anyway, so I got married in 97, so that's 2004. My wife had no idea, how much at risk we were.
Yeah.
She had no idea. But anyway,
so you just to kind of pause for a second. So he had ran the business from its inception.
Oh, he was the third owner of the business.
Okay.
So there was, the business is Kiko. So basically, the two brothers that had started the business in 1963, their last name was Keister, and so I guess if my last name was Keister, I don't think I'd call it Keister Company. And so
Kiko.
So they took the first two letters
Yep.
of Keister and then Co and created Kiko, which to me like means nothing but is a strong brand, just because it's not common, right? And so I've always stayed with that brand. But anyway, so those two brothers owned it for a number of years, and then they sold it to a guy named C.D. Schoaf, who then sold it to my boss, Doug Yost, who came at it from the box business. He was in corrugated boxes, before he got into the plastics business, and he'd only been in that business for really just a few years, and that's where he had just fired a plant manager that was kind of his combo manager and engineer, and so that's what created. He felt he needed help with the engineering side, and so that's why he brought me. He had no idea that I had aspirations of buying his business from day one, but like that's just that.
Was the gear always part of the logo?
No, it wasn't. So when we did our brands, with our own products in 2009, we used to have a logo that. So the original logo was a K with an I in it, right? I could draw it better, but just a K with an I for Kiko Incorporated. Then when I created the first branded products, I created what amounts to a circle with you take the K, the little less than sign out of the K and stick it inside of a circle. And so like that was my way of creating a cooler logo, and that it still embraced history, because that's kind of, you can't forget history ever in life. And so like anyway, so like that little Pac-Man basically was our new logo. Then when we decided to really start growing into more than just tabs and into this Kiko body repair products business, which would have been 11, 12, somewhere in that range. That's when I did a 99 designs contest, and I wrote up what I wanted. That like, okay, here's my first logo, here's my second logo. We're going into this automotive space. I want, I don't want to just, be tabs. We're all these tools, and I want something that, has, some automotive, sort of feel to it, but I don't want it to be like a car. There was way too many car logos and things, and so anyway, so that we had the full Kiko body repair products logo that we have now was basically what you see today, but call it that gear became taking the old of what we have, that old circle with the little
beak looking
beak looking thing, and putting a gear around it to kind of bring the automotive to it and the tool, to it, and then basically at that same time, Kiko body repair products, that was the main logo as we have right here. And then at that time, I also thought, okay, well, someday I want a mark, an alternate logo, if you will, that doesn't say anything. It's just the gear. And so I had him create the guy that, won the contest. Basically, I actually wasn't one guy that won the contest. I took about 3 different ones and I kind of melded them together and then awarded a winner, but told him what we wanted for the logo. So anyway, and then we created just that gear, as a mark, as a logo on its own, because someday I hoped at that point that I wouldn't have to say the name, that when people saw that gear mark, that meant Kiko. And
sure.
They understood what that meant, right? So that was my first understanding of branding, or call it at that point in my life, I didn't know that much about marketing or branding, but I did want that logo to mean something, right? So yeah, so that's kind of where that went.
So before we move on with this story, just that whole experience of buying that company. Mm-hmm. So I have another friend who worked in a business and was able to buy the company from the previous owner. But a lot of people think, okay, if I'm going to buy this business, I basically have to, they don't understand maybe the options in how you would buy that from the previous owner. Mm-hmm. You don't have to go into detail in your specifics with you, but just for somebody who might think okay, that sounds more doable than just trying to find a business to buy, mm-hmm. buying it, from within the company through the owner, just with your experience in mind, how could that be possible with somebody that doesn't have millions of dollars?
Yeah. So you're basically, you're looking for an opportunity, but the fact is, even if if you go into a business and the owner's willing to sell it, and you're willing to buy it, and you start talking about price and structure, the biggest thing is, where's the money coming from, right? And most of the time, most conventional banks, are not very interested in financing leveraged buyouts. That would be what that would be. That would be termed a leveraged buyout. And banks conventionally, they might, EBITDA, cash, the cash a business throws out, they might finance a year or two of that. But, a seller is going to want 4, 5 times, 6, 10 times, the earnings to be able to sell it. And so, a seller, if they find their guy, that they believe can run this, and, they can step away, now they can command, a higher multiple if they're willing to carry that note, if they're willing to be the bank, and so, in this case, my boss decided that he believed in me enough that he was going to give me that chance, to pay him out over time, rather than finding a buyer that would be someone who would pay all cash, right? And so that benefited him, at getting a better multiple, for the business. And, we did, the business did own real estate. It did own its own building. And so we did leverage as much as we could against the real estate, right? So I owed the bank as much as the bank would potentially loan me on the real estate. And then I owed him the rest, right? And so like if you don't have an owner that believes in you and is willing to take a chance on you and loan you the money basically over the course of time, then it's really almost impossible, to buy a going concern like that. I think owner carry is largely the only way that it can happen for someone that's young, that doesn't have any money, right? You got to be able to have assets, to lend against, And like I said, if there's good cash flow, the banks might lend a little bit, but banks get real nervous with ownership changes, and they would get real nervous with the idea of a 20-something-year-old, or early 30-year-old, person that has never owned or run a business before. So, it was really just, and truth is, like, as we worked through that process, he and I got at times frustrated, because you get an attorney and the attorney's helping you, and the attorney's like, oh, you're paying too much for this and you're paying too much for that, and I'm looking at it, I'm like, and so I get frustrated and I'm going back and I'm trying to negotiate with my boss, who's also the banker, and at the end of the day, he gets it was. I just remember, I was bringing up good points, right? And I knew they were good points. But the fact is, it's all in his control, right? And he looked at me and he said, listen, like, I'm not having this conversation anymore. He said, this is the deal. Take it or leave it. And I stormed out of his office and I sat and thought, the rest of the day and then all night that night. And I thought, I got no other opportunity. Like, it doesn't, the price, the terms, like, terms are more important than price always in a deal. But like price, why do, this is an opportunity. I've got to take this, because like, what else am I going to do? Like, if I go, maybe borrow enough to buy one machine, this business had 12 machines or something at that point. If I could borrow enough to have one machine, now I got to have a place to put it. Now, like, there's all these things, and it's like, this is, to be able to have an opportunity at a going concern, and,
When you say going concern,
yeah,
what do you mean by that?
I mean, a business that, has been in existence since 1963 that, has, a significant amount of revenue and a decent amount of profitability and a number of employees, 20-something employees at that time. And, it's something that, a brand that had existed, in its space. Like, there's so much more value. It wasn't a startup, right? There's so much more risk in startup, right? And so it was like, how much do I believe in myself? Do I believe that I can take this bad deal and make it a good deal? But, and that was really that was really what ended up happening. Now, we went through some really tough times, after that, which, I don't know what you want to go through those right now or not, but like,
I want to hear it.
Yeah.
This is very interesting. I think people are going to eat this up.
Yeah. So, like I said, and I'm not afraid to talk about the numbers. It was, it was about, it was a little over $4 million that I had borrowed, and I was looking at it. It was going to take me at least 10 years to pay it back. I was like, yeah, man, that's a long time. 10 years is a long time. And so I thought, well, I got to grow it more, because I doubled the size of the business, in order to get the opportunity to buy it. Because basically when the owner had said, yeah, I'll sell it to you, but like, there's nothing to talk about today. There's no way that the business, has enough cash flow to pay me back. And so I spent about 2 years. I spent about 2 years growing it to a point where, it could pay him back. So then we did the deal.
Wow.
Then I looked at it and it's like, now it's going to take me 10 years at least. So it's like, okay, I need to grow it more. And I doubled it again in about 2 years. But sounds good to say you double it. what I did to do that was, of course I've always been probably, I'm a utility man, right? I'm not great at any one thing, but I can do most things, and so, I was decent at selling. And so, but how are you going to go pull away business from someone else? You're going to underbid them, right? And so I bought a lot of revenue. And then, truth is, when you are growing, you're going to hit certain thresholds where it's hard to be able to keep scaling. And so basically I got to this situation where, we doubled it, but like we were barely making any money. Everybody was stressed out. All my people were stressed out because I couldn't really keep hiring people. I was just trying to
doubled revenue.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. But not much was falling to the bottom line because we created a lot of inefficiency in that process. I was not a very good operations thinker at that point in my life. And then that's 2 years into it. Revenues doubled. We're not making money, but then I lose about $2 million worth of revenue overnight. And at that point, I now owed $5 million because I had talked the bank into giving me at some point in that process a $1 million line of credit, and I was pressed to the top of my $1 million line of credit, and then I lost that $2 million worth of revenue overnight. Somebody underbid us, right? You play that game, you win it and you lose it, and so somebody underbid us. We lost that business overnight, and then now I owe $5 million. I don't have any more room on my line of credit. Now with lower revenue, now I'm losing money every month. It got in a few short months, it got to a point where, I had no room on my line of credit. I had no cash. I was collecting like crazy. My accounts receivable was clean. Everything was within terms, within 30 days, and I was trying to get people to pay faster. My payables were like 4 months, 5 months. I was literally on the phone with suppliers asking them, would they please believe in me? Please send me material. I'll pay you. I promise. Right.
Wow.
And
Wow.
Anyway, it was crazy. It was a crazy time in life. And, it was tough on the family. It was tough on everybody, but we never, we had to get rid of a lot of folks. We had to, we didn't have any building cleaners. We didn't have any office cleaners. My wife and I were doing that in the evening. We didn't have a mowing crew. I was doing that in the evening. I was doing everything.
Yeah.
Just to stay alive. And I would say that it's only by the grace of God that we made it through that. We should not have. We should not have. And there's still a few people like my banker that I still do business with today saw that process. A few other people that saw that process, and like around Oklahoma City, there's a few people that look at me like Lazarus a little bit, because I should not have made it. I should not have made it, and but in that's what changed my mind. Once I made it through that, it's like, listen, I don't want this same business anymore. I don't want a business that has low margins. I've got to have, freedom is in higher margins. And how do you get higher margins? You need your own products. And so basically it was that year of, going out. I love New Year's, and as 1 year in, so it was, made it kind of through the tough times and kind of got it stabilized by late 2007 and into 2008, but then I didn't have my own products. I was so toward the end of 2008, it's like, hey, I need to create my new. That's what I got to do is have our own products. And so you go to work.
Before you get into the new products, how did you dig yourself out of that? Like, how did you regain stability in the business?
Well, a couple things. You look to price things better, right? So I'm looking for new work for the business, and at the point where you realize that you've lost if you don't do something different, you don't have anything else to lose anymore, right? So it's like, if before I thought, I might be able to make some money at this, pricing it at $1, like, but I might not. And now it's like, no, like I've already lost if I can't get $1.25 for this, right? And so that I changed my mindset, in how I price things, because it's like I'd worked my hardest trying to get efficiency in the plant, and I'd say that we did make some strides, but the fact is, I just started pricing myself out of it. It's like, listen, if I want something different, I've got to, expect more for what we do, right? And because at that point it was an easy decision because I wasn't going to survive without it. There may be people listening now that are like, I'm making a good living, I kind of get crammed down sometimes, but like I'm doing okay. Well, I think that the best thing you can ever do, is, draw lines of, expecting more for what you do, right? Then you got to do good work, right? People don't come back if you don't do good work, but you need to expect more. And so that's really the best part of, that was the key piece of getting us out of our tough time.
What kind of products would you have been building back then?
Yeah, we made parts for pumps, I don't know if you guys have ever, sump pumps, things like Little Giant Pump Company. I don't know if you guys have heard of them, but, parts for pumps, some parts for vehicles, but, really like internal strut pieces and things like that. We also had some oil field parts. The oil field parts were huge for us, at that point. The oil field parts were things that during that time, I picked up a lot of oil field work, and that oil field work did have just a bit more profitability in it, and that made the difference, to be honest, right? But like I said, it starts with expecting more, when you go to find new work, and it's just at that point, I've always been, I struggle with being a really great delegator and really building. I like to do everything. In some ways, like one of the, as I was sit down and I've talked to employees, each and every employee about 6 months ago, and I would know as I was sitting there talking about our core values, which our core values at Kiko are we're honest, we're committed, we're encouraging, and we're winners, right? And as we were thinking through that, there's as I was talking to our people about that, I was talking about how those things build on one another. Won't go through everything, but like when we say we're honest, it means that we want to be honest to the point of transparency. So it's not just the difference between telling the truth and telling a lie. It's a transparency that will allow you to be able to build trust. Because, once trust is built, that's what I mean by being committed, right? Yeah. Like I trust you, you trust me, right? And then when, if we're honest with one another to that point of vulnerability and we've built trust and now we're committed. And then if I can find, ways to encourage you that say, all right, I'm not going to make stuff up, but Matt, when you do this one thing, you're the best in the world at it. And if I can do that, and now you can start seeing, kind of non-linear results, right? That's where the snowball effect happens. And I coach my kids in sports. All growing up in the middle of trying to do all this, right? But that's what I noticed in kids is that, man, if you can get them to trust one another, and if you can get them, if you can encourage them, that's when you get the snowball effect and the momentum. Like everybody watches sports and they're like, this team's got the momentum. Well, what that means is that like they believe such, if one team if they're battling it out, and it's an even score for 2 quarters, in a basketball game or something, and then all of a sudden one team goes on a 20-point run, it doesn't mean that they're that much better than the other team. It means that they got the momentum. They started to believe, right? And so anyway, this whole idea of encouragement, I'm not particularly good at it sometimes, but I know the value of it. And so when I was talking to my employees, I started telling them about, how I'd seen that in my own kids and in the other kids that I'd coached, that like, man, if you can get them to really believe in what they might be able to do, they can have results that you never ever expected. And it dawned on me that like when I'm telling these stories to employees, it's like, why don't I have stories of how I've coached my employees, my teammates, in Kiko, in the same way that I've got these 20-year-old stories from coaching my kids. And I realized that it's because I tend to want to be a player and not a coach. Probably if they would have let me play t-ball with 5-year-olds, I would have rather played than coached. But they won't let you play t-ball. They make you coach, and so you learn to coach. And that's one thing. Honestly, like even this year, in the last couple years in my life, I'm saying I've got to learn to coach in my business. I've got to learn to do that.
Well, you said you have a hard time delegating. Mm-hmm. Well, I think there's a couple. I mean, I don't know a whole lot about you on that end of it. I've never been in that environment where I could have an opinion about that. But what I have seen about you is like I feel like there's people who don't want to delegate because they don't think anyone else can do it right besides them, right? And that's probably a bad.
Yeah.
But then you have the other people who don't want to delegate just because the FOMO, they just want to do it. Like They just enjoy what they're doing. Like, I mean, as a business owner, you kind of have to, like, for me, I was doing a dent out here earlier, and that was supposed to be for one of my technicians, but I just couldn't stop doing the dent, not because I was scared he was going to mess something up, but because I just really enjoy that part of it still, and I don't want to stop because it's a therapeutic thing for me that I enjoy. Mm-hmm. And so, you're here, which speaks volumes. You didn't have to come here. You're not like a disconnected owner who's just wants to sit back, have everyone do it, and you just sit on your back porch drinking a Mai Tai or whatever.
Sit on your keister.
Yeah, exactly.
But you're. I feel like you want to be involved, right? I think that's a good thing that you obviously have to manage that and understand. But like, you're coming from a place where you want to be involved. When I saw you in Italy, I was kind of like confused why you were there. No, I mean, out of just like, why are you here? And I mean, other guys were all setting up, and I was watching it. You had your team setting up the booth, and you were helping, where you felt you could. I don't think you weren't like, move that over here, bring that over here, come here, bring it. You weren't doing that, but you were just like, I'm going to put this little thing together. These guys are orchestrating and doing, and I'm just going to assemble this. You're the owner of the company. You're in Italy assembling a thing, not because you have a problem with delegating per se, because you're letting control, but because you want to be there and you want to be involved. That's what I saw of that. And I mean, that's why you're, I think, here at the podcast, is because you wanted to be involved in doing it. Like, yeah, and you can see that from even in your story of you building the brand. I mean, you're passionate about it. As I guess that's what I'm trying to wrap this up in saying, is like there's a passion that's there that I can see that you have brought to the business, who've built this brand, and you wanted to be in the factory, even way in the back in your discussion. You wanted to be out there. You wanted to be involved with what's going on. I think that's tremendous as an owner, and what you're in any business. I think is to not let your finger off the pulse of the business, but to be actively out there watching it, listening, being on the ground, hearing seeing the play-by-plays and understanding the difficulties or the challenges. And, I came from a large business that I worked from where I feel like it was opposite, where the owners were just literally on the cruise boats, disconnected, and they'd come in and do the pep rally thing, and then they're off back to their cruise boats, and they're disconnected from the part of the business. And so I think you're doing it right, in my opinion. Again, I mean, that's just my perspective into it. And
yeah, I think there's positives and negatives. That's what I've learned. One of the things we use a personality profile at Kiko called Culture Index. And when we first started doing this, I had business owner friends that were using personality profiles, and I was like, no, I don't want to put anybody in a box. I don't want to be put in a box. I'm not doing those things, but then when you kind of keep having failures, of one mode or another, you think, and you see all these other smart people, that are running, good businesses, and they're doing things like that. I thought, okay, I'll try this personality profile thing, and I took the personality profile thing, and then I had the guy that was Mark Connolly, who was with Culture Index, called me, and he said, hey, let me go over this with you. And he said, listen, you are highly independent. You are somebody who, doesn't need direction. That also means you don't want direction. You don't want direction from your wife or anybody else. And I was like, maybe this guy's got something, and then, so he was going through all these things. Some, everybody that's independent thinks, oh, that's really, that feels good to be independent. Then he said something that brought tears to my eyes. And he was like, cause he's just reading, these things that their, program spits out. But he's like, this person is not a team player, and it's like, God, that hurt,
Wow.
To think that but that's, if you're highly independent, you're a team of one, right? And so you have to fight selfishness like nothing else, right? And so it was something that, so then I was like, okay, well, I'm not sure that this is me, but all right, do the rest of my office folks and have my wife take this. If there's one other person in the world that I know really well, let's see what hers says. And so then we see, and I read, the results of hers, and I know it's her to a T. And now all of a sudden, all the things about her that drove me crazy. There's things obviously that I love, but the things that drove me crazy, I could accept because it's how she's wired, right?
Yeah.
And we're very different. I mean, and I think God does that for a reason, puts, opposites together to create, a better family unit. But this idea of being independent and wanting to be involved and wanting to be in the center of it, it's good, but it can be very bad. You don't allow your team to grow, to your point of you can probably respect the fact that I'm there and I'm involved versus these guys that are on the cruise ship. But if you work for the guys that are on the cruise ship and that, business is successful, that business is going to be successful because you made it successful, right? So you as the managers and the workers in the business have to make it successful. It's not them, right? And so they're empowering you. And so by me being too involved, by wanting to be involved, which I have always thought was, just, hey, I want to be involved. I want to help. I'm in fact holding people back sometimes by doing that. And I'm in fact holding my business back by doing that sometimes. So this is a process of discovery that I'm just going through, is trying to learn how to coach better, trying to learn how to figure out how to not be as involved, right? And not feel like I have to be as involved in everything. So anyway, that's good stuff. You just constantly learning in life, constantly learning, that all the stuff that we're doing with training now, I didn't used to really value training that much. But when we created all these tools and people didn't know how to use them, it was frustrating. So it's like, listen, we got to create training, and then you create this great training that when people take it, it makes a massive difference in their success. But then a lot of people won't take it; they won't pay for it. So now I've become this like advocate, to think of, to say, listen, like you should have a lifetime learning, like this idea that like class, is, a program and then you graduate. Like that's a wrong idea. You should never graduate from anything. You should always be continuously learning. And so this is it's funny to me because like I didn't, really discover this until I start trying to sell training. Right. And so like, that's kind of the selfish capitalistic nature of who I am. Like I want to sell training because I want to sell tools because I want people to be successful with those tools. And so going through that process, and now it's like, well, now I really value training, but like now that I value training in that way, it's not just for Kiko customers. It's now internal. Like we spend way more money, like training people in the plant, training my managers. We never spend any money on ongoing training, but we're starting to spend more training, even if the training's bad. If I send you to training, even if the training's bad, you're gonna at least, realize that I believe in you enough to invest in you. And that's going to change your mindset, and you're going to believe more in the company if they're investing in you and they're trying to help you. And so anyway, there's life, this idea of continuous lifetime training is something that we're really, trying to embrace. And the way I look at it, the only part of society that's figured it out is sports. And it's just articles. It's call it anecdotal research, but I would say that my anecdotal research would say the average tour pro in their tour earnings, not in all the sponsorship and stuff, but tour earnings about a couple $1 million. That average golf tour pro that's making a couple $1 million is spending somewhere between 10 and 15% of that on ongoing golf lessons, instruction, personal training, all those kind of things, right? He's spending, he's spending a couple $100,000 to make, why? Because he has to, because everybody else is, right? And you were talking about that, earlier, is that like you feel, and that's, the PDR industry is probably better than most at, embracing training, but still not good enough. I think it's better than the collision industry. The collision guys don't really embrace training much. Right?
I think the collision guys, and I'm speaking from the outside looking in, they go to some of these classes because they have to for whatever reasons, whereas PDR guys, they're their island unto themselves and they can do what they want and they kind of shy away from ongoing training. In my experience, a lot of Dent guys feel like they've arrived and they know it, and there's a lot of ego and who's this guy? Why is he going to train me? Why would I subject myself to that? And the ego kicks in, and then they kind of shy away from training. I don't understand why that's a thing. I mean, it's really a bad personal stance to take. Like you said, you should always be a student. I know that I've had lots of guys come through the shop that are less experienced than me, but that doesn't mean they don't have something to teach me. I mean, there's anybody, you can learn from anybody, a wealth of things from anybody, and you should always pursue being a student of some sort and positioning yourself, which is act of humility to position myself. Like I just told Danny last week, I was like, I want to come to your class and I want to stand there with my mouth closed and I just want to learn. I don't want to well, here's how I would do it. I don't want to, that's not at all. I want to go be a fly on your wall and learn. And listen, I mean, with all full disclosure, if I absorb 20%, great. Then I absorb 20%. If I absorb 100%, great. I'm going to go there and if I would do that, I would go there and learn. But you have to be humble enough. I think that's really the start of it, is you have to have some kind of layer of humility that says, no, I can go here and I can learn from this, and it will be valuable to me. And
so I was listening to the Sean Ryan podcast. He had Leif Babin on, and he was involved. At one point, he was in charge of training all the new officers that became SEALs. And Sean asked him, what was the number one attribute of a guy that would tell you that this guy's going to be a successful officer, like leader? And he said the number one thing he said was humility. That was the number one thing that would predict success in the SEAL teams for a leader.
So as we, I believe that wholeheartedly. And as we have created training programs, the number one thing that we talk about as we train our trainers, and to a point where it like almost gets uncomfortable at a time with new guys, that are wanting to help train, because we do full-time, we have our full-time guys, and then we have ambassador trainers, that are, largely PDR guys that are training for us. But, I believe that, you have to, before you can bring any sort of curriculum, you have to connect, right? The best way to connect is through humility, right? But what tends to happen is, somebody that's new as a trainer, they're trying to, every person, and particularly males, we all struggle with self-confidence, right? And so we're all struggling with self-confidence. And so, as a trainer, one of the first things you're trying to do, I watched Tom Brady do this as a broadcaster. Rather than lean into being a real broadcaster, he talks about, how his football days, he talks about all the things he did as a quarterback, right? That's, you don't want to do that as a trainer, if you're trying to validate yourself and give your resume all the time to your trainee, that's not humility. Humility is like, listen, I'm here to help you, right? And like, that is number one. And that's why Danny is magic as a trainer. We have decent process and decent, technique and good tools, but we connect, and it's purposeful that we connect. And I hired Danny because he's a connector, because he is a naturally humble person, which again, like, even in here's a question for you: as you have become more known in this space, as you obviously, you do that Rivian repair, you're on the news. How many other PDR guys have been on the news, right? The tools that you have, they're innovative. You have a lot of respect in those. You're a trainer. You have people. You now have this podcast. You have people that are looking at you. I think you carry yourself, with humility as well. How hard has that become for you to stay true to yourself as a humble person with success, with notoriety? We have this social media world we live in. It just there's no way to bring your business to the masses without talking about it, without talking about yourself. Do you find that that's difficult to stay humble in that process?
How do I answer that without sounding
honestly
arrogant?
Yeah.
I want to be genuine. I don't feel it's hard because I still see myself as that guy. Like, I don't see myself as this person who's jumped on the scene, who's very influential. I know that I have some of that, but like, if anything, like, it's actually positioned me the opposite way. Like, the reason I reached out to Danny about going to his training was because I feel the pressure because let's just say people are looking at you. sooner or later they're going to see your faults. And so I have to continue that growth. I've got to, people are, like I said, they're hot on my tail, and I need to keep growing. So like I literally called Danny about going to doing GPR training with him because I feel this constant need for my growth. Like the bigger that we're getting as far as what we're, the podcast or the training, like I told him, I mean, I just told you in the shop, I'm like, if I'm having these people come to me for advanced training, I want to be cohesive with what I'm communicating with what Kiko was communicating. And I don't want to have Matt's way of doing things and there's Kiko's way of doing things. I want it to be all cohesive. And so I feel like I need to go subject myself to more training. So yeah, to answer your question, no, it's actually made me go the opposite to where I feel like I don't have this cocky, arrogant, I've arrived mentality. It's actually scared me the other way that like, oh man, you better keep hustling, keep hustling, keep hustling. The challenging repairs feed my tool building because the tool building comes out of being in a unique predicament where I need this device or tool. And so I have to be creative with my tools, which means I have to be in those bad repairs where I need that tool, right? That's where that comes from. And then when I make a pretty complicated repair on Instagram or we make a reel and people see it, then they want to come train potentially. And so I just have this constant cycle that I kind of have to keep active in because it all feeds each other. And if I lack in any of it, then it's almost like this cycle stops. And so I want to keep pushing myself with doing harder repairs, which means I have to subject myself to that because I want to keep developing tools that feed out of that. And I want guys to want to see that and say, hey, I want to learn how to do that. Matt, teach me. Mm-hmm. And so it's just this constant pursuit of more for me, I guess is how I would describe it.
Yeah, that makes sense. We call that our verticality. And we believe that is the secret sauce to who Kiko is that like because we develop our own tools, and we have our own. It's not one guy, so it's more complicated, right? We have engineers, and because we develop our own tools, we manufacture our own tools, we sell direct, we train direct. And, we need those tools to work and we want those tools to accomplish what they need to accomplish. And when they don't, it drives us to go back to the drawing board to keep, innovating, right? So that, we have the exact same business model as you, right? We do. And like that verticality is what's special about, you talked about whether we're bigger than, any other PDR tool company or not, or collision tool company or not. I don't know. I just know that verticality piece is unique, and then the honesty and humility that we couple with it to where we're going to try to look in the mirror and say, is this what we say it is? Mm-hmm. And if it's not, we better change what we say or fix it, right?
Yeah.
And so that's, we have a very similar model, but that's, we call it, our unique, is our verticality.
I also think there is a discipline every human should be doing, which is subjecting yourself in an act of humility to something else. It doesn't matter what it is. It could be taking on a new sport, that you absolutely suck at, and you're like, I'm going to go do this, or working out, or whatever it is. Like, but when humans think that they're like the biggest fish in the pond, and then there's always another bigger fish, and there's always another pond. Mm-hmm. And I think we let our egos kind of get a hold of us, and we think our crap doesn't stink, or we're the whatever. And I think it's just a good discipline to subject yourself to something either that you're not good at So take up a new sport and go in there and say, hey, I have no idea what this is or how to use it. Can you show me? And position yourself underneath someone who's going to be an authority of something and teach you something. I think that's just a healthy thing to do.
I agree. Yeah.
And then also, just the growth that comes out of just subjecting yourself to like always trying to be that student and to open yourself up to that growth, man. Those are just things that we as humans, I think, should be doing, and you shouldn't stop at. I don't care if you're 6 or 80 years old. I think it's just a healthy thing to do. Because if you don't, what's the alternative? Like, then you've figured it out and you know everything and you stop growing. Like, that's just, to me, is not a good position to be in anything. And so that's how I want to be, is just always kind of growing and trying to be better. It doesn't necessarily always mean dents and things. That could be whatever that is you're doing. But I think it's just healthy to step back, let someone else be an authority figure over you in something, and you be the student. Always, I think is good.
No, I agree with that completely. And the thing about we call as our trainers we call it the difference between teaching and preaching, right? A preacher can preach the truth, and then it's up to the audience to then apply it or not apply it. But a teacher is going to measure their success. A preacher's going to measure their success. They're going to measure their success by whether they preach the truth, and then it's incumbent on the audience to then decide, right? And then they've done their job, right? But a teacher is going to come alongside you, and they're going to measure their success by your success, right?
Yes.
And so that's what we do in our training. It's like, listen, like, it's not about what you can do, though. Like, Danny is incredible as a technician. It's not about that. It's about where can we get these guys, and he gets that, and he understands that, and he approaches that with humility, and I'm thankful for that. Gene did too when Gene worked with us, and I think Gene got excited about that, and really on the opportunities that he had with Kiko created in him a really strong desire to teach and to train, and now he's trying to do that is doing that on his own, building his own training business, and that's cool to see. It's cool to see. We've had a lot of help from a lot of people over the years, and some of those people are still with us directly, and some of them are doing their own thing, and it's one of those things where, like, I kind of consider it like all those people that have helped us. I'm both rooting for them in their own business and their own endeavors, and rooting for their success, because, like, I think that if they have success where they are today, some small part of their success where they are today, we helped them with that, so that makes me feel good that we've been able to help them. And also, if they're in our space, I'm competitive and I want to beat them, right?
Yeah.
But it's kind of like, it's friendly, right? And like, if you played sports against your brother or your best friend, there's nobody you want to beat more than your brother. When you played basketball or whatever it is, like, and doesn't mean you don't love them. It just means that, like, they've been close to you and they've been a part of it, and so that's what's kind of cool about where we've been. It's been both. It's been so good to have different people like Jonathan and Gene helping us and being a big part of who we are and a big part of the identity. Like, for me, I own the business, but I needed to step back and elevate, a technician, I believe, to be the face of the business. it's a technician business, right? And so you need a technician to be the face of the business, but it's challenging because then that person, when they don't own the business, they rightly believe that they've had some, impact on the success of the business, right? And so and then it becomes this idea of like, did Kiko give the opportunity to the person, or did the person give the opportunity to Kiko? And I just think it's the wrong question. I think it's, it's like, it's the idea of scarcity versus abundance. Scarcity says there's only so much and I got to get mine and I got to keep it from you. And abundance says, listen, if we work together we might be able to create more than we thought possible,
Sure.
And so anyway, that's where, like, over the years, I'd say that there's been, some challenges and some, relationships that have not been as strong as I've wanted them to be, or as they once were, because of the ebb and flow and the change in our business and the change in someone else's, business and what they desire for themselves and their life. And so, like, that's one of the things that, like, keeps me up at night, makes me struggle with the hard parts of what we've been able to build and create and do. But it's also, strangely, the things that I'm most proud of is that those deep relationships, have created, situations where, people move out, on their own to do it themselves. And whether they did that, the same way I did when I first started, or whether they felt that they didn't get as much of an opportunity or as much of a recognition, as they should have got from me. I mean, like, those, I don't, I try not to worry too much about that, but I also, I don't want to not think about it either, but, like, today, largely Danny's the face of our business, and Danny's not the owner of Kiko, I'm the owner of Kiko, but, like, where we are today, I can honestly say, and just like I said with Jonathan, when he was the face of our business, and when the period of time when Gene was the face of our, man, I'm so thankful for these guys, because of who they are, they represent us better than we can represent ourselves sometimes, right? And like that, those things have been a real challenge, and it's like, Danny and I are, like, really close friends, really as close as you can be when you're the owner and somebody works for you, right? As much as you, and if you don't own your own business and if you don't have people that work for you, maybe you'd never understand this, but as much as you would want to just be one of the guys, it's impossible. You can never be completely one of the guys, when you're the owner of a business and somebody who works for you. It's not the same. You can have a good relationship, but it's not like coworker to coworker. It just isn't, and so anyway, those are things that, like, man, the success that we've had in first the PDR business and then into the collision business. I mean, truly, we've changed how cars are repaired in the collision business today. Like, and people, hundreds really of people that are current Kiko employees or previous Kiko employees, and there's a lot of people that have been involved in that process, for us. But there's certain people who've been the face of it.
Yeah.
Jonathan Van Fontaine was the face of it for some period of time. Gene Fetty was the face of it for some period of time. Danny's largely the face of the business today, and I sit here and worry about, well, I don't want Danny to be on his own doing something. I want it to stay the way it is, but I also know that things don't always stay the way way they are, and that's okay, right? So anyway, those are things that those are things that when I thought about what I wanted to talk about here today, I didn't set it up very well, but people have watched us for, a decade or more, and, people have seen, Jonathan be the face of the business for some period of time, and Gene to be the face of the business for some period of time, and now it's Danny, and it's in a way I'm jealous of people like you, because your business you're the face of, right? And it's just not it's not directionally right for my business. It's not I'm not the technician, and so but it's like I said, equally the most challenging thing that I've had to deal with. And it's not just face of the business. We were terrible at e-commerce, until a guy named Kenny Austin came, and worked for us in 2018. And, that's when we learned how to market. Sitting here, James said to me when I walked in, hey, you guys, he's obviously understands marketing and branding very well. James does. And he's like, listen, you guys get it. And I'm like, yeah, thanks. I appreciate that, but I didn't get it until Kenny came. Yeah. Kenny's the one that taught me, right? And Kenny's now in his own business, and he's doing extremely well, but, when you're that highly independent person that's not a team player, like, you and it's your business, and you nearly that died basically. If it died in 2007 or 8, and I somehow lived through that, and it's just been such a challenge to have, especially being somebody that wants to be in the center of everything, right? It's just such a challenge to have good people that I've enjoyed and truly loved as friends to not be as involved as they once were, right? Because it's life, right? I mean, and that's the idea of growing a business, and if I was, if there was, hey, what do you worry about most in a business? It's like, I don't want to, I don't want to lose a guy like Danny, because he's just so important. I mean, and,
Sure.
And I have no idea that Danny says I'm never going to leave, and things like that. But like you just never know, right? And but like those parts of growing a business are the most challenging parts for me. But I will say that, like, when push comes to shove, it's like, the graveyard's full of irreplaceable people, right? And so, like, if we just, when we have to, we just pivot and move on, right? We've reinvented ourselves in the business a number of times in the 20 whatever years that I've been associated with it, and we will continue to do that as we need to. But it's when you care about people as much as I believe we care about people, and then it becomes a bit of a struggle to figure out how to coexist. Like that's the hardest part.
Yeah,
that's the hardest part of this journey that we've been on.
Well, let me ask you a question. I think we kind of deviated a little bit, which is all good, but going back to your story about your business, and kind of how did you guys get into glue tabs? Because you were making plastics for pumps, and you were doing all this other non-industry specific stuff to us, and then at some point something happened. And can you walk us through the introduction into PDR products, which is, I mean, so just kind of pausing, like, what your business now is, what percentage PDR products, what percentage other products? Yeah,
so Kiko body repair products, which are PDR, GPR, those, it's about 60% of our revenue today. It drives more than that of our profitability. So we still do 40% of our revenue is still just making parts for other people's products.
Okay.
Today. But it was that year of 2009 when you don't work January 1st, which always bothers me because I get so excited for New Year's. I'd rather like work the first. Like, and so taking the day off on the first is just like, it's always drove me crazy. So I go to work on January 2nd. I'm like, listen, we are not just a contract manufacturer anymore. We are a branded products company. That's what we are. And everybody that works for me has never worked for a branded products company, and they don't know what it is, and really neither do I. But, I believe that if you want to become something, the first step is, visualizing it and then stating it and then working your way to it. And it's like, okay, Chris, what do you mean by that? Well, we're going to make products. What are we going to make? I don't know. like, you got any ideas? And so, we did a number of things. We did practice golf tees. That was back in the day, where those zero friction tees were all the hit, and basically, but they had 3 points, and they were, because they had 3 points, they had less friction, but if you lose a point, now all of a sudden you can't. It's not a golf tee anymore because it's got two points, and a golf ball won't sit on it. So we made a 6-point. But the points, the little blades were half as wide, so we could claim the same friction. Just stuff like that we did, and some coffee business. And then a guy that worked for us in our tool room, a machinist, came to me, and he had a little red Worth tab, and he said, my son-in-law is a dent guy. And I said, what's a dent guy? And he said, it's Paintless Dent Repair. And I said, what's that? I literally didn't know.
What year was this?
2009,
okay.
Right? So, and he said, well, they fix dents paintlessly, and they do it largely with these rods, but like up on the rails and stuff, they have to glue these tabs on. I was like, oh, yeah, that's cool. And he said, these things sell for $2 a piece. And I'm like, all right. Now you've got my attention. And so I said, but this guy's Terry Stark, doesn't work for us anymore. He's retired. But I said, well, Terry, I don't know anything about paintless dent repair. And so I took that tab and I set it on my desk and, went about my day. But at some point during that day or a very subsequent day to that, I was thinking about another customer of mine, which I make these floor plates and foot plates for drywall stilts, for the stilts that the guys, the construction stilts. And that guy's name that owns that business is Raymond Emmert. And Raymond Emmert's son was Sid Emmert that had Dentcraft. And I remembered Raymond telling me that his son had this, push tool, PDR tool business. And so I called Raymond and I said, hey, would you introduce me to your son? And he did. And so I went to see Sid, sat down in Sid's office, told Sid my story, about how I'd nearly lost the business and that we were going to make products. And Sid kind of looked across the table at me and he said, I go to a lot of auctions. He's like, auctions for failed businesses. And he said, I pick up a lot of good deals. He's like, this lift right over here, he said, I got that thing for, 3 cents on a dollar. He's like, but I don't want to go to your auction. He said, I like you. I want to help you. And he reached into his drawer and he pulled out this sack of tabs. And he said, as far as I know, this is every tab that's made right now. And he said, I was going to come to somebody like you to make some tabs. But he said, you know what? You get a pencil paper, and he said, I'm going to tell you what I think is wrong with every one of these tabs, and you just make them. And so I took a pencil and paper, and he went through, the Worth tabs and the titty tabs and all that stuff that was out there in that day. And, I wrote down what he said. Then I went back in my plant, and I did destructive testing to figure out how strong each one of them were. And I did burn testing to figure out what they were made of. And then, when we first made our first little dimpled tabs, the idea with that was like the Worth tabs were the consensus where they were probably the best ones at that time, the domed ones with the rings. But, what Sid didn't like about them is the glue would get down in the rings and you couldn't clean it out. But he's like, it's good because these rings give you more surface area. And I was like, okay, well, a golf ball has greater surface area, and so we used that golf ball dimple to create more surface area. And at the time, people thought they were great. They thought they were the very best. Looking back on it, it was ridiculous because we know now that when we want to get the best adhesion to pull a dent, we want to be as flat as possible, in as smooth as possible, so that, and people think that it's like, I've heard people describe it as like vacuum, like when you put two pieces of glass together that you can't separate them. Mm-hmm. I don't think that's it. And matter of fact, I know that's not why, but I never, until fairly recently, I couldn't articulate why. But I was talking to an engineer from Hinkle, the glue folks, a few years back, and this lady was really an intelligent engineer. And you think about like this tab you got here, that's all these scratches on it. You think about a lot of times when you want good adhesion, you actually rough up the surface, and you rough up the surface like Sid was thinking, to create a more surface area, right? Mm-hmm. And to create a better mechanical bond. Well, that's all well and good if you're using, like a super glue that is a low viscosity, a very runny adhesive. Well, these hot glues are not runny and not low viscosity. They're high viscosity. And so, they're not going to run into all the nooks and crannies very well. They're not going to run into those rings on a Worth tab. They're not going to run even into the dimples on a Kiko tab very well. But they're the flatter and smoother. That's why, cleaning and polishing your panel helps you. Having that smooth tab just gets, that's the best, since that adhesive is so viscous. It's not going to flow into those thin areas. So anyway, bottom line is that's a bit of a tangent on tab technology, but we did create that that dimple tab, and it was the best thing going back in 2009, 10, and we only sold them through Dentcraft. And Sid didn't even buy them from me. He let me put them in there on consignment. He was literally paying me 85% of selling price. He only kept 15%. It was he was so kind and so nice and so helpful, to my business. And, then, he died about the time that we were starting to continue to develop bigger tabs and really start developing more lifters and things. And so I knew that there was a, time coming when I was going to have to go out on my own and not just sell through Dentcraft, and Sid would have known that and realized that as well. But when that time happened after he passed away, I think still today, the folks at Dentcraft, if you put a complete truth serum in him, would say, Chris forgot where he came from. He had to go out on his own, and Sid's the guy that gave him the start. But that's all true, right? But at the end of the day, Sid would always say, I don't stand on anybody's head, right? I want people to grow and develop, and so I think if he'd have been alive, he'd have realized that, like, man, what they're developing over at Kiko is this collision repair system that is something that gets beyond what Dentcraft has or where Dentcraft wants to go, and so therefore it's time, right? And so anyway, there's just lots of little, nuggets along the way, but that's how we got started in it in 2009. And then, like I said, we, as soon as we did well with the hail tabs, we thought, why can't you fix a big dent with this? And, the funny thing about that was the PDR guys in 2010, when we made those first super tabs, there wasn't many of them at all that would attack a big dent. And so, like, we would go and show, and guys would be like, listen, that's for the body shop. Yeah. And I'm like, I don't know anything about the body shop. So now there's a whole nother industry I've got to try to figure out how to get into, and anyway, so that whole process of, like, like your repair on the Rivian, when you did that repair, like, there is one reason why that was possible. and that's glue pulling, right? Like being able to take that large surface area of the tab and, depth reduce that dent to a point where now it's something you can deal with. That's what allowed you to do that. And the reason why, some of the body shops that were quoting the huge numbers, that, it made the headlines on that dent. The reason why they didn't attack the dent the same way you did is because what we started in 2010 with, super tabs and then centipedes, guys like you had embraced for, fairly early on. And so you've been glue pulling big damage to some level, for 10 years or better, we just started taking this to the collision shops in really 18, 19, 20, right? So the reason why, you're able to take that and they think, oh, that's got to be replaced. I mean, part of it has to do with economics and they want to replace as much as they can replace. But the other part is they haven't had glue pull at their disposal the way that glue pull is at their disposal today.
Sure.
In the same way that a PDR guy does. So anyway, that's the process.
Well, you guys have totally taken that aspect of it and just really revolutionized repair method. I mean, whether or not it's with PDR guys or with even body shops. I mean, what you guys have done in the last, I don't know, 5 years or whatever, that you guys have been making these huge push for the body shop. It's been huge. I mean, you're literally, like you said, you're changing the way cars are repaired. Could you speak on any of that? I mean, like that. That has been like the greatest. I mean, it's actually scared some of us PDR guys, because we see it. We're like, wow. I mean, that's really, you're kind of leveling the field a little bit, but you're not. Because what they're doing is there are two different skill sets, GPR and PDR, if you really know what the nuance of it. But I mean, you've totally revolutionized and given body guys way more abilities than what existed 5 years ago. And you guys have done such a good job with taking these things into that space and changing how body repair has been done for, I don't know what the years have been, 50 years or whatever. It's just been really interesting to watch. I mean, and so when did that start? 2018?
Yeah, I'd say that it was a bit earlier than that, right? So we were at Kiko. We kind of had 1 foot in the oil field and 1 foot in this PDR collision thing for a few years, from say 2009 to 2014. By 2014 we had super tabs, centipedes. We had obviously Robo was about like 2010 or 11. We had we had K-Bar. By then, I think it was either 12 or 13 that I met Jonathan, and what Jonathan is he helped me to understand. He'd come from collision. I met him at Germany, and we were talking to him. We had the centipedes, and our first original centipedes, were flexible. Were 12 inches actually, and they were flexible this way, and they were also flexible side to side. They were almost too flexible. And what he had done is he had taken a steel steel adapter to create rigidity that helped make that a more effective tab, right? And so anyway, in doing all of that, I began to understand, a bit more about the collision business. I was only in the PDR circles, and he knew the collision business better than I did, even though he's, in Europe. And so, things like K-bars and K-beams were new to PDR, but like bars and beams, leverage beams to pull studs and such, had been in collision for a long time, right? So those are the things he was like, hey, you need a bar, you need a beam, right? Of course we used our platform to create those. Well, then we started going to SEMA. Well, when we first started going to SEMA, okay, well, it's a big automotive show that, we've got a collision system. Let's go there. So we went there. We would do demos. People would almost get mad because they would see how good that glue was sticking, and they would think that, like it was snake oil. Like, what's the trick? Like, there's no way that glue's sticking that well. It's like, well, there's no trick. And like, they just weren't ready for it. That's like 15, 16, we're still developing tools. It's like, okay, you got to get in front of the OEMs. You got to get in front of ICAR. I worked my hardest to get in front of ICAR. When we got in front of ICAR in about 2018, to 17, 18, when I walked in to present to ICAR, which at that point, everybody that I knew was like, yeah, well, ICAR won't let you in because they don't talk to PDR. I'm like, well, we're not PDR, we're collision, right? Because we created the term GPR, glue pull repair, to separate from PDR, not because we didn't want to be PDR, but we knew enough that the collision guys knew enough about PDR to know that they didn't have time to learn it, and they weren't going to, and so we needed to separate. All the while knowing that at some point it's going to start coming back together again. But we created GPR. We went to ICAR and we said, I said, listen, like, this is the least invasive, best quality way to fix a dent. And we're going to change how cars are repaired, with this system. And, they kind of like, it's kind of cool. And, Jonathan went with me and we got, in front of them, and we really, pulled some rocker panels, pulled some quarter panels, things that they didn't expect were possible, right? But by getting into the game with people like ICAR, and then later on, the new EV guys like Rivian and Lucid let us in, like in 2020, 21 timeframe, and we were able to get in front of those folks. And, when we showed them, the new OEMs, because they're new, are just more willing to be, to listen to the new ways, right? And so now they look at it and they say, wait a minute, like, we don't like filler in our cars, and we certainly don't like welding, right? So this is a way that maybe that wouldn't, that we don't have to, we can say no welding on our cars, no heat in that way. And maybe someday no filler in our cars. Both Rivian and Lucid both said that to me in 2020, 2021,
wow.
I'd say. So yeah, that process of, again, it's like, it's almost no different than, when we walked in 2009 and said, hey, we're not a contract manufacturer anymore. We're, a products company. And, when we walked into ICAR and I said, this is a system that's going to change how cars are repaired, I could see it, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, like, I didn't know how we were going to get it done, but I could see it, and so, we began to say that, at every trade show we'd go to, and little by little, we started having success, and starting to build out this collision repair system that is, the least invasive and best quality way to fix a dent. So it's been a fun ride. I will say also that, like, that scarcity and abundance mentality, like, that scarcity that says, hey, I gotta, there's only so much, and, I gotta get mine. I think that's the divide between PDR guys and collision, and abundance would say, hey, listen, if we work together, maybe there's just more, we can create more than we thought there was. And I think that, it was 2018 when I went to the Hale conference that Ryan Hampton did. Mm-hmm. He asked me to give a seminar on glue pull. And so I planned the evolution of glue pull. And so I did. But I also had a lot of PDR guys in the room. And so I was going to shoot my shot at that moment and talk about the fact that I needed trainers, because at that point Jonathan was my only trainer and he was in Belgium, right? And so I told Jonathan, I said, listen, I'm going to give this, presentation to the PDR guys, But, what I'm also going to give them is an opportunity to join us in our efforts, to go change the collision business. And I told Jonathan that beforehand. He's like, they're going to string you up because they're not going to, they're going to be threatened by that. And then at that time, the other, I'd say my best friend in PDR at that point was Keith Codentino. And I called Keith and I was like, hey, this is what I'm going to do. And like, man, I'd like you to join me in that. And Keith is like, Chris, they're gonna crucify you, and he's like, I'm, like, good luck, right? And so then I go and I give this scarcity versus, abundance mentality speech at the end of the evolution of glue pull, and one person after that seminar comes up to me and introduces himself and says, "Man, I like what you had to say," and it was Gene Fetty, right? And so. Anyway, then Gene comes and, we were starting to do a little bit of training. Gene comes and he learns from Jonathan. David Shalott had been working for us a bit already. Kevin Andrews had introduced me to David. So, really Dave, Big Dent Dave and Gene, were my first guys, helping in the U.S. And Gene, is just somebody who really enjoys commanding a crowd, right? So more so than Dave. Dave never wanted any part of that necessarily, right? So that became like Gene's role is moving into preaching this message that like, listen, like this is not PDR. We're not taking PDR to the body shops. We're taking this glue pull repair system, and it's going to be cleaner, less invasive, and it's not going to take away from PDR. It's going to create more visibility for PDR and actually drive more business, to PDR. But what it will be is it will make PDR guys, if there is one thing, PDR isn't going to stay the same. What I knew at that point is it wasn't going to take away from PDR, but it was going to require PDR to take on more difficult damage than what guys were taking on in 2018. The idea of like being able to make great money day after day fixing dents like this probably wasn't going to exist anymore. But, making even better money, doing something that is more challenging, was going to be possible because of what we were doing and bringing these industries together. That's what I believed then, and that's what I believe now.
Yeah, we were talking in this shop. I mean, just the evolution of, just like I said about my cycle, you have this evolution of training, and then you have this evolution of the tools, and even what the car is made out of. We have to applaud the manufacturers, because what we can do on the cars now on these softer, thinner metals, you couldn't do them on a 59 Lincoln, you know what I'm saying? And so the way that cars are even built now have all added to our ability.
Absolutely.
You go back to a 2000 Chevy 1500, like the bedside on that thing, like my hands are tied on what I can do with that panel as opposed to a newer model car with different access and thinner and the metal moves and just the way it's manufactured. The paint, even like, the durability of the paint, arguably, now, but the flexibility of the paint. It's all added to our abilities. It's all kind of culminated to this perfect thing that we can do a Rivian repair like what is there. I couldn't do it without the glues. I couldn't do it without the tabs and the systems. And then all of a sudden the technique or the industry kind of funneling us there in a way that has kind of aided that. And it's like, after I did mine, there's other people doing it. I'm not trying to, but after I did mine, it's like you see other people doing it and other people doing it. You kind of open this doorway over these other repairs that it's like, because it's just, some of it was like, we didn't know it was possible. Lack of, whatever you want to call it, lack of confidence or lack of knowledge. And and then you see someone else do it, you're like, oh, I can do that. And then you just have this kind of snowball effect into our industry of guys doing really killer repairs. I mean, I told you, I look at my phone every day and I'm, who's this guy? What the heck? That's amazing. That's crazy. And it's just this exponential growth that just has happened in the last, 5-7 years. That's just been mind-boggling for me as a technician. And also fun, also cool. I mean, I'm constantly as a technician looking for that next challenging repair, my next Rivian. Well, probably never going to have one of those, lightning, strike moments for me again, maybe. But I'm not in it for that. I'm in it because I want to be challenged and I want to know if I can fix it. I love what I do and I love the challenge of it, and so I'm constantly looking for that next estimate popping up on my, my email, like, hey Matt, saw you. Can you fix this? And I'm like, I don't know. Let's see. Because I'm looking for that endorphin spike or whatever for me. But it's been really fun ride, and you guys, I always said, I have to thank you guys for your development in that, because it's totally made us as technicians, expanded our capabilities beyond we could have done 10 years ago. So
yeah, well, appreciate that, but it is this collaborative effort, right? And that's what's again, we talked about earlier, that verticality of, we're designing tools, we're manufacturing tools, but we're literally the same people that are doing that are walking a trade show floor and talking to the technicians that are using the tools, and getting that feedback of what the tool can do and what the tool can't do. And, that's where, like I said, Jonathan gave me that feedback better than anyone else. And that's why the first time I talked to him, I said, you've got to help me. I need you to help me with this. I believe, literally the first conversation we ever had at my trade show booth, I said, I can see you being the face of my company because I know where this can go, right? And so it is this, cooperative effort, between the manufacturers and the technicians. And like you said, I'm really glad I was remiss in, not bringing up the vehicle technologies and the fact that, the steels are much thinner. They're strong, but they're much thinner. And the aluminum, is thin, and the aluminum's difficult to deal with in the body shop. They blow out holes when they try to weld it and all those kind of things, right? So this, this journey that we've been on is, we were in many ways right time, right place, and so it's taken a lot of effort, but as with anything else, if we didn't do it, somebody else would have, right? Because it was right time, right place, for us to develop the tools and the system that we had. And it's funny, like even the lateral tension craze, all this tensioning, gosh, that's all technology that's been around for 50 years or more, ever since they started making cars. The guys that were stretching the outside, to be able to pull more effectively. And I saw that on a video from Marty Runick that's probably a 15-year-old video, but yet it didn't make it to mainstream PDR collision until the last couple 2 or 3 years.
Well, even Marty Runick, I mean, I'm not taking any credit from him, but his is old school body methods. I mean, he's just taking knowledge that's already there and applying it to PDR. And I'm not trying to take away from that. I'm just saying, but like it's not new stuff. It's just stuff that we kind of lost track of. I mean, you have to look. I mean, I've been in this since '98, and if you just watch the evolution of this industry and how it's come from, and we're fixing door dings, we're fixing dents, dings, and now, I mean, we're doing super complicated stuff. And you mentioned the GPR, which is, for those who don't know, just to kind of fill in, that stands for glue pull repair. And that means something like a body technician is going to use these things to lessen the depth of the dent so they can still go in and Bondo and fill and paint. right? So they're not really doing PDR because that's not truly paintless dent removal. But even paintless dent removal really doesn't speak to what we're doing now. Like that Rivian would not be a paintless dent removal. It's not truly paintless dent removal because it's more than that. Like it's not giving it its full credit for what it is. That's paintless collision repair. And so I think we're having these three things, which is PDR and GPR, but somewhere in the middle here, we're getting into this PCR, and this new thing that's kind of coming out of it. I mean, I could say if it needs some type of lateral tension device set up on it, and it's bigger than, let's just say, $1 bill, it's not really PDR anymore. It's more of a paintless collision repair because something collided with that in a big way and has changed it, and it hurts us as an industry, as PDR techs, to call it that because there's a stigma with what PDR is, which is small little door dings. Mm-hmm. I had an argument with an adjuster about 2 months ago where it was a caved-in Sprinter door that was literally tacoed, where I could stick my fingers in the door gaps. Mm. And I wrote it up, and it was an insurance job, and she's like, yeah, that's a $600 PDR job. And I was like, this isn't a PDR job. Like, I mean, we just need to understand what we're doing. Like, you're grouping my repair with a PDR guy, a door ding guy, maybe a hail type dent. This isn't that. You need to take me out of your PDR category and put me more in your body shop category, because what I have to do to this door is more along on the lines of what a body shop would do to fix this. There's not a dent guy who's going to fix this dent. This door has been structurally changed in a way that I have to reform it back, which is not PDR. This is paintless collision repair. And
Yes.
I had to have that discussion with her, and it went from being a $600 repair to a $2,700 repair, because I had to stand my ground and take myself out of this PDR category and move myself closer to the body shop end of the spectrum. Not all the way, but somewhere, but out of PDR. Like, sometimes being identified as PDR can hurt us because it's carrying with us the last 20 years of what we've done, which is little door dings. Mm-hmm. And now we're migrating out of that. And again, I just got to roll through Instagram and I'm seeing everybody. I mean, very rarely do we get door dings in here. Like, and let's just say again, because the cars are so soft. I mean, you can lean on a car and create a big caved-in dent. It doesn't have to be in a collision with the car or telephone pole. It could be, a body collided with it, or a kid on a bike in a driveway collided with it, and it caved in this quarter panel. And that takes a lot of skill to unfold in a way that has a good solid repair. And so that's when I say we're collision, not that.
Are we not saying TFORM anymore?
Well, I think.
Oh, I got an opinion on that.
Okay.
So Keith called me, to give me the rundown on TFORM, and I listened to him, and he said, listen, like this, we're trying to take a page from your book because you said, all right, PDR doesn't fit what you're doing. And so you created loophole repair. And he said, like, we're doing this collision damage, but we're not getting paid for it, so, I said, okay, he said, we need a new definition. That's the problem. We need a definition. And he said, I said, what's the definition? He said, tension-based factory original restoration method. And I was like, well, so, I'm devil's advocate. So I'm like, okay, so if it's a door ding, but you go ahead and put lateral tension on it, is that TFORM? Like, you didn't need it, but you did. And so is it like you're waving a wand over it, trying to get paid better for something that you didn't really need, right? And I understand that tension is needed, a lot, right? More than people are probably willing to spend the time, putting the tension on. So that was my first objection. And then my next objection was, like, when you say factory original, You ever look at the backside of a panel you've been scratching on with, those sharp tools? You ever look at what those holes look like after you've been in there? Like, it didn't factory original. And he's like, well, but it's still better. I said, listen, like, what you're doing is, subjecting yourself to a fight that you don't need to have. It's there's no reason to. Yes, I agree with you that it is better, but why call it factory original when it's not? It is not factory original. And I said, furthermore, I don't think you have a definition problem. I think that if you want to, if a paintless dent repair shop wants to get paid like a collision shop, they got to act like a collision shop. You got to start, getting the vehicle. You got to sign up, to Alltel, and you got to have the vehicle procedures, and you got to understand what clips can be replaced and what are one-time use, and then you got to learn how to figure out, how to get outside of just Mobile Tech RX and start, using the cross section between Mobile Tech RX. I mean, it's fine to use it, but like, you also need to be on CCC or Mitchell, and you need to, like, this whole idea of, you mentioned it, but like, paintless collision repair, I think that's right, but I think paintless, in my mind, these are visions and something I'll probably never get done, but like, for a few years now, I've thought paintless collision centers, PCCs, that's what I believe the future is, right? But like, they can't be like, you can't be just winning an argument based upon your estimate. It means you got to do everything that a collision shop does today, except paint. That if you want to win that argument, you do everything that a collision shop does today, except paint, right? I mean, then you win.
Yeah.
I think you want a battle with a particular estimator, but you'll never win a war until you operate in that manner that I just mentioned.
So then what do you think is the answer for our, not the answer, what direction do you think we need to move as an industry to get pointed in that right direction?
Yeah, I think it's that you have to, sign up to like an Alltel or those kind of services that, when a vehicle comes in, you're pulling the procedure and you're, doing the repair, on things that the OEM allows, right? And then I think when you create your estimate, based upon, you would create an estimate as if you were painting it, and then you create an estimate with not painting it, right? And then you justify the difference between the not painting and painting by the quality of one versus the other. That's what I think.
So like right now, if I have an insurance job pulling here, like that door that I just described to you, the Sprinter van door.
Everything would be insurance, by the way.
Everything.
I think everything's insurance. Like there's hardly, there's Caliber Collision, doesn't have non-insurance jobs really, right? So it again, like I think that's where it has to go, for it to truly stand on its own and to be able to truly, get the kind of money that you should be able to get, for this, these paintless collision repairs.
The only hard part that I can say is that just, being a shop owner myself, is that there's not a real hard line. So like, just before we sat down on the podcast, I went out and did an estimate, and it was just a little door ding. I mean, he's not going to pay insurance for that because it doesn't justify paying insurance. It doesn't justify his deductible. I'm going to quote him $212 for a little door ding.
Right.
And he's going to pay out of pocket. And then you have everywhere in between up to that, like, so just to kind of go back, like this, the Sprinter van originally was I don't want to go through insurance. I just want to pay cash. And I quoted him a high dollar amount, and then he called me back and he's like, "Hey, I changed my mind. We're just going to do insurance now." And then that kind of changed the repair. But what I'm saying is like we have repairs that come in that are just door dings. that will never be insurance jobs, and they want to avoid the insurance. And then you have everything in between, which is, you have some repairs that are $6,000-$8,000, and then you're approaching this $1,000 deductible threshold. And then you will even get some that it's like you'll quote $1,500 to $2,000, and even if their deductible is $1,000, like, I don't want to do insurance. I just want to keep it off the books. And I'm just kind of pausing here a second. Is the other side of that is the Carfax, like the beauty of what we can help with a customer is in keeping that repair off the Carfax. We don't report to Carfax. I don't report to Carfax. I'm not telling anybody what happened here other than my accountant, maybe Instagram. But the question is like, if this converts to an insurance job, well, now insurance sells the information to Carfax, and now it became a Carfax claim. Right. And so on one hand, I'm trying to steer people to insurance because I want the money and I want the bigger ticket on that insurance is going to pay. Such was the case with my Sprinter van I told you about. But on the other hand, you kind of are with the customer and they're like, yeah, man, I want to keep it under my deductible or not even under, but I want to keep it. I want to pay out of pocket. I don't want to have to go through insurance. I don't want to affect my Carfax. And so you're trying to preserve that with them. And so there's this muddy line for me as a shop owner. Like, I don't want just everything going through insurance because I'm not going to get these little door dings anymore. Someone else is going to get them, right? I mean, I want the door dings. Those are probably the best money I'm going to make. If I could have these lined up all day, I wouldn't even want to do the large Sprinter insurance jobs. And to be honest, I mean, those are more challenging, more complicated, more time consuming, man, if I could just turn and burn a bunch of little $200 door rings all day, I'm happy. But on the other end, you also want these large, complicated jobs because that's essentially our hail money. If you're not getting hail, a lot of the hail guys aren't doing that stuff because they have the other side of that, which is the hail money. But so like, I don't want to shut off the door dings. I want that, but I also want these large jobs. And so every job is almost like a contemplation of like, how do I address this? Do I, help the customer here and try to keep it fair and not push them over into an insurance and then make it show up on the Carfax? Or do I just be kind of sterile to it and be like, here's the price, Mr. Customer, the price is going to tell you whether or not you do it to insurance or not. I just kind of have this sterile, here's my price. You decide what you want to do, insurance or not. I've heard a lot of guys do that too. And I'm just telling you, like, for me, like, it's a really hard position to be in because you do have a kind of foot in both worlds and you're trying to play in both. And it's not always that easy.
Yeah.
Right?
I think this is just one man's opinion, but like, I'm definitely somebody who likes to do everything, but the problem with trying to do everything is lack of focus, right? I mean, you can't focus on. You don't have a big enough operation here to focus on both of those things. So my opinion is, you'll never be great at being a paintless collision center unless you are really focused on that collision center damage. And then when that small job comes in, if you have a department that is, the PDR department, that's for little, the door ding department, right? Then you use that department. But I think you have to, my personal opinion is you have to focus on what you are not today, which is a paintless collision center that acts like a collision center, to be able to get that. And then if you still want to take the door dings and you want to let people pay cash for those, that just becomes a department, instead of farming that out, to a PDR guy, you're doing it yourself, but it's not your focus. The collision, the collision shop, they're not going to say, we're not going to fix that door ding. They just bring a guy in to do it. right? Because it isn't their focus. So, you don't have to. I mean, and to your point, like if you can get enough door dings, you shouldn't. You don't want the gray hairs that are going to be and the body aches are going to be associated with the big stuff. But if there's not enough of those, and you want the collision work, and you want to get paid like a collision center, you got to act like a collision center, and you got to just act like a collision center that doesn't paint, right? And focus on that. That's I think having, you've defined your problem well. You got one foot in both worlds, and as long as that's the case, you may make some progress in both worlds. Probably will, because you're a talented guy, but you won't make as much progress in either world as you could if you focused. That's what I believe.
It makes sense. I mean, there's a lot of, if you just look at, I'm just going to use examples like, let's just say Bryce. I mean, I don't know. I don't know how many little door dings he's running around doing, but I would imagine not many. I mean, most everything that's coming through his door is bigger stuff that we see on Instagram. Obviously the training too, that's a huge part of what he's doing, but he's doing the bigger stuff. And I think we kind of like James, he's had his own business, broken away from Dent Wizard now, but he's had his own business for almost 2 years.
A year.
Okay. And you've definitely, I think, maybe found your niche of repair, right? Which is you stray away from taking off panels like we're doing. You stray away from the large insurance jobs. You're mainly just doing door dings or smaller type PDR dents, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So the van, is it at the top of the van?
Bottom.
Bottom. Have you gotten that call yet from the top of the van where the roof part's crushed too, and then
We got one this week.
Okay, I think that was for me.
Yeah.
But so like you're saying, I had to make that decision where it's like, okay, that's where I draw the line. It's like, if the panel needs to come off to fix it right, I'm just going to send them to Matt. Panels, there's another Explorer, big blue Explorer door. Have you gotten that call yet?
I don't know.
Oh. But yeah, it's like, I'm in my mind, I'm like, okay, and right now I'm not booked out as much as I want to be. So I'm like, I want to do that, but do I want to be in this guy's garage or driveway on a hood stand with that thing gutted and plugging it back in, and then there be a code that needs a scanner, needs send it to Matt?
Yeah. So we're doing.
Yeah.
What I think, like we've attracted that type of damage a lot, as far as the big, severe, more complicated, not many people can fix it type of stuff. Like, that's most of the stuff that comes through here is harder, more complicated repairs. Very rarely do we get the easy stuff. So we've already been migrating that way. And when I wouldn't say it's been enough for me to like. I haven't adopted any of those, the Mitchell or the CCC. I haven't done that. Right now, I outsource all that. We still do it. I outsource it to Keith and his company, who translates everything. So, they are going to show us OEM procedures. They are going to show us mandatory replacement things, and we buy those things and we do those right. When an insurance job comes through and it has those line items that tell us those things, we do those things as a body shop would. But we don't have enough business revenue or traffic that will facilitate me going that way 100%. And vice versa the other way, I don't have enough of the door dings make me go that way. So that's why I'm saying, like, I'm in this blend of, I don't mind doing the big complicated stuff because I like the insurance work. Even though it is a little bit of a headache, I don't like that's I can navigate that. It's just business. And then it helps with my tools, helps with my training. It all it feeds the right thing for me, that stuff. As opposed to Dordings, I'm not taking pictures of Dordings, and I'm not putting on Instagram, and I'm not impressing nobody. To be honest, like that's just not how I think. I mean, the big nasty stuff is what's gonna get the people coming through here for training or wanting to buy my tools. And so I am kind of focused on that way, but we just haven't had enough of it to really like say, this is the world I'm living in now. I guess is more of my answer. I don't know if that, but
sounds like a marketing problem.
Listen, man, and I will say we do a really good job with Dent Slayer, I think, with marketing, but with my local business, I really dropped the ball. Like All Out Paintless Dent Removal is my local business here, and I don't market that enough. I mean, I want to say, I could do a better job with that. I don't do a good job. I think the focus really for us has just been Dent Slayer, and that's where all of our efforts have been. And I've kind of neglected the marketing of all out, and that kind of feeds itself and it self-sustains. And we do wholesale work too. We do for the dealerships, and I do all enterprise rent a car for North Florida, and so that feeds a lot too, where I don't have to market that. That's just ticks on its own. But I could do a better job at marketing the stuff. But yeah.
So I wanted to just say, like, the way that you transformed your business is kind of insane. So you basically went from a company kind of probably puts out there, hey, this is the exact part we need. Here are the exact dimensions and specs. Everybody bid on it. And that's what you're doing to coming into this thing where you're having to do everything. Like it's pretty crazy. The type of person it takes to do that is kind of a different person, right? Like you you're like, okay, we can make this, here's the price. We can make this, here's the price. And then like, no, I'm going to go figure out how to just completely make something totally new and then bring it to market, sell it, push it, disrupt the whole industry. It's when you think about it like that, where you came from to where you're at now is it's insane. It sounds like a lot of work.
It has been an incredible amount of work, but it's an absolute labor of love. Like, you mentioned the word, Matt, passion, some point an hour ago or something, right? And I do have a tremendous amount of passion for business in general, but this business of dent repair, has been something that has unlocked a fire in me. And here's the thing about passion. Like when you look up, it sounds like, I mean, it says you have passion for something. It's like, mostly people think, oh, that's cool. Like, that it makes you excited. You want to do this, right? Sometimes passion is not how much you really want to, but how much you can't not. So, and you're kind of a prisoner to, I can't not. And so once we decided that this is what we wanted to become, and then once we were immersed enough that we could see it, now it's like, I can't not. And so, I get tired. I get, we've made good money. When I get done with this, my wife's waiting, and we're going to, drive all the way down to Miami and spend a couple days more or less off. I got a couple meetings I got to do, but like, she gets frustrated that like there's not more like real vacation. I mean, she travels around the world with me, and we get to meet people and do business, and we have a really cool life. But it is a lot of work. It's been a lot of work, and it's
that's what you wanted.
Yeah, that's what I wanted. Yeah, I couldn't not. And so we have that, and then it does. When whatever time you have here on this earth, you want to make an impact. And so, we as a team, and those that are been with us for a long time, those who haven't been, those are customers, we have made a very significant change in first the PDR industry and now the collision industry. And, the whole training thing now is like got my attention because it's like, here's another battle to fight, because I just believe that people don't invest enough in becoming the best that they can be. They're not lifetime learners. And it's like, you know what? If we changed an industry and disrupted an industry by bringing a new technology, then we can change the industry by, helping people understand that if they invest in themselves, it will return, And so, but it's like, do I want to put that much effort in? Do I want to, why, right? And I will say that that's another thing that we've really spent a lot of time thinking about is like why do we do what we do? And we've developed, I've never wanted to be somebody that just had a mission statement that was on the wall and it didn't mean anything, right? It has to mean something, right? And we say now that we're building a brand that builds people. And that's what we're doing. We're building a brand that builds people. We have, there's a guy that we were talking about earlier, Matt, that was going to come to you for training, may still come to you for training. He came to me at MTE and he said, and like with tears in his eyes, you changed my life. Your business changed my life. Like he meant it, right? I mean, there was tears in his eyes that like what we have done, has created opportunity for him in his business and created a quality of work that he didn't think that he could do before, or he had no ability to do before. And so like, that's a pretty special thing when you can, build people up in that way. And we're able to do that with, this verticality model of designing tools and, manufacturing those tools and then sell them direct to the end user, and then coming alongside and putting our arm around those end users and teaching them, training them, building them up. The problem we have now is that we're robbed of both us and the student are robbed of the training experience because people don't want to pay for it. So now I have to, somebody has to, and as many people as I can get to talk about it with me. When we decided that we wanted to use, glue pull repair rather than, PDR or glue pulling, for our dent repair process that we're going to body shops with. Every PDR leader that I knew at the time, I called him and said, hey, I'm going to start using the term GPR, glue pull repair, rather than, just generally glue pulling, because we want to create something that can stand on its own, right? And so, we did do that. We need help. The world needs help reminding itself that we need to continually educate ourselves. We need to continually teach and train and invest in ourselves to be the best version of ourselves as we can be, right? So those are things that, like I said, like you said, it has been a lot of work for us, and it's not done yet. We're building an international brand, and gosh, that's a whole nother subject. It's so hard to make money internationally. It's a little easier to actually get visibility internationally than it is to actually make money at it. Because it's, if you creating a distribution foot in the UK or Australia or wherever you're going to put it, you're now fighting, you created a thin margin for yourself, but we need that focus. If we just use distributors, they're not going to wear my brand. They're not going to bleed Kiko the way we bleed Kiko. They're not going to employ this true verticality, if you want your brand to be international, you as the brand that is your job, not some distributor's job.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of work in that too, right? So yeah, it's just, and at the end of the day, there is only so much time in the day, and there's so many, my wife and my family mean so much. So just trying to figure out how to balance it all, because, we've gotten quite a bit done, but, if I wasn't married or didn't have kids, I can't imagine, my life without them, but I would work 24/7 probably.
Yeah.
because I love to work, but
But you probably wouldn't have as good of a reason to work.
that's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, I'm, trying to build, those people too, right? I'm trying to build a family. I'm trying, anyway, and yeah, it's been an incredible journey, and there's a lot of other companies. I've been fascinated at the good work that Charles Ayoun at Cam Auto's done, because he's largely done it by himself.
Yeah.
So he's been, I'd say either right alongside us or maybe a step ahead or a step behind at times. Where we are, and I'm amazed at his tireless effort that he puts in first the collision business and now in the PDR business as well. And obviously the folks at Anson are doing a lot of different things. Dentcraft's always been a great tool company. One thing that I know I've told you is John Collenbach. I love that guy, and I think he's created a really nice model for himself, in that he's taken the pressure off of himself and his internal team for product development, and he has aligned himself with people like you and John Vadine and Rick, and maybe others that I'm maybe not aware of, but like that's another really cool model. But all those guys, we've all put a lot of effort into helping this industry grow like it has, And
Yeah.
so I think it's the future's bright, but I do think that when you go to MTE, and I've gone to MTE for years, there's a contingent of people at MTE that would love for it to be the same people year after year, getting together, having the same party with the same tools, and fixing the same smaller dents, that they've made money on for 20 years. But fact is, that's not what the future holds, for the industry. It's got to keep growing. It's got to, guys were growing old and having, a good income, but not a business, that has equity that they could potentially sell and retire at some point. You get to have that, you got to have brick and mortar in a shop. And then when you have that, it's like, oh gosh, I got to do more than just these, smaller dents. There's not enough of those anymore. I got to do the big dents. I got to do PPF. I got to do ceramic. I got to do, all these things. And MTE now is, growing. There's way more of an acceptance for the detail side and the PPF side and all those kind of things at an MTE, because I think people are realizing that things do have to change. They need to change. Human beings by and large don't like change, but when you can, be at pace with or even ahead of change, can't be too far ahead or you won't ever make any money, right? But it's that balance of like trying to keep pace with it, or maybe just be a step ahead of where things are headed.
What percentage of body shops in the United States would you estimate that your products are in right now?
There's data that's mixed as far as the number of body shops there in the United States, but maybe there's 30,000-ish, body shops in the United States. That's a number that I've heard, but and we have thousands, of our systems in body shops. I'd say we have maybe 7,000 or 8,000 of different, over the course of the last 5 years. Not everybody has the latest and greatest, but we've got thousands out there, today. And fact is, like, that's a big one-time equipment buy, so like we've been ramping up. Well, at some point we're going to hit like this saturation and plateau, and I think we're kind of getting there, and so, okay, well, what's the next step? What, how do we continue to grow? Because you have to grow to continue on. And, anyway, that's, there's not enough really consumable, in our side of it, a little bit of glue and, the smaller dead center tabs and alcohol and such is nothing compared to a $5,000 system or a $10,000 system. We now have, with our premium L2E system and our K-Tower and, training that goes along with it, it's very easy for one single body shop to spend $20,000 with Kiko today, 15 to 20. Not everybody does that, but those that do are getting all of the full system of actions, and again, we've now, we sort our, we think of our tools as a system, right? And our training as part of that system, and then the tools within it, we now on our website, we organize those by the actions that they do. If it's pulling, right? If it's tensioning, if it's striking, if it's lighting, if it's pushing. Those are the 5 actions that we think of, and those 5 actions now define every tool that's within our systems. So yeah, it's a challenge to continue to stay ahead, and it's also a challenge that once you start to get to this, maybe a place where you're starting to plateau a little bit, because there's, especially with selling direct, there's a lot of shops that we can't reach because we're not going to walk into we don't have the foot traffic through distribution. Distribution, we got to figure out how to lean into distribution a little bit better, because those guys are walking into shops. But the problem is when they walk into shops and they just have a brochure of Kiko or even like a video of Kiko, they can't articulate the story very well, and we don't trust them to train. They can't train, and so like they might go to some shop that is not active online, that knows nothing about Kiko, and they might be able to sell them a system. But if we can't figure out how to get those people trained, that system is now going to sit in the corner and collect dust. And then their buddy that is also not online is going to say, hey, what did you, what's that? Oh, that's something I bought that doesn't work, right? And so anyway, it's just, I think our growth from here gets harder, not easier, unless the guys that don't have it, start getting more active online, which I suppose they will, right? Like 20 years ago, Amazon didn't really exist much, right? So it's as things grow, online business, there's hardly a business today that, well, we all know that every business should have an online presence, but many do not. So as we got to figure out how to reach those folks that aren't online and aren't, I guess, early adopters, or we have to wait for them, to get online, right? So anyway, yeah.
So I asked you about this earlier, but that we've noticed that you are investing money into producing content online on social media. So, like, if you don't have to answer this, but I'm curious, like, what does that look like? Do you have like full-time content creators at Kiko? Are you outsourcing that? Like, do you have a full-time editor? Because you guys put out a lot, probably more than anybody. I would say you probably put out more stuff than anybody. We try to put out stuff, but you guys, it seems like you have more people doing that. So it seems like you probably are leading in that, unless I'm forgetting somebody. But if you're not the leader, you're up there.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that very much, and we do have that's another kind of story within the story, and the fact that like we knew we needed to do that, years ago when Kenny first joined us. He led us in that path, and we were using subcontractors at that point to come in and create our content. We were trying to get Jonathan to the States as often as we could, and the content was okay, and it was infrequent. When my daughter, when she was hopeful to be an actor, and she had passion for it, she had a dream, and so but she was going to college, which was good. And anyway, she when she finally realized that she probably wasn't going to be an actor, which was 2 or 3 years into college, she pivoted to something called Creative Media Productions, CMP. She, however, wasn't, so it's like it's the closest thing to a content marketing degree that I can think of, and it was all things, content related, video related, in behind the camera, in front of the camera, that she got that from the University of Oklahoma. She is way more comfortable in front of the camera than behind the camera, and so she's she's morphed into more of a salesperson. Fact is, I was adamant that my kids weren't going to work for me whenever she graduated college, and so she went out and it was doing a content, creation sort of a business or job for an insurance business, and then quickly moved. They figured out she was a good salesperson, so she quickly moved into sales, and now she's come back to join us, recently. But my son, who was 2 years behind her, thought he wanted to be a finance manager or a finance major, but he and math don't get along too well. So I think what he really liked is my buddy Jason, who's a banker, wears a suit and has tickets to the Thunder game and has has tickets to the OU game, and takes guys on hunting trips. And I think my son was like, yeah, I want to be like Jason. I want to wear a suit. And anyway, but in college he figured out that he was not a great finance thinker, but when that kid was growing up, as long as since he was about 6 or 8 years old, if we got a new TV or any kind of new piece of equipment, he was the guy that was going to hook that up for us at the house. That's not something I didn't want to mess with, right? And wasn't really my cup of tea, but it was always, he's got a great deal of patience. He's pretty creative. So he went and pivoted to that creative media production degree and started working for us part-time. And I had to break my rule about not hiring my kids right off, because he started, his ability to film and edit really transformed the quality of our content. Really did, when he was still just a kid, right? And so, and he happens to be really good at graphic design too. He just understands what clean design is all the way around, and so he's full time in that side of it, and he has been now for about like 2 years, I'd say. So yeah, he's doing a great job there, and now we got to figure out how to get him more help, because I'm trying to. I've got a consultant who's really great at filling the top of the funnel, trying to understand Google Analytics and really strategy programs to put together effective cost per click campaigns and things like that. And I want Hayden to learn that, because that's a good place for him to grow. And so I've got consultants that I've hired that are doing that for us, but also helping to educate him. At some point, we'll probably have to backfill, his content creation. The other thing that, it may not be that visible to anyone else, but Danny is really good with an iPhone. I mean, Danny's really good at filming, for somebody that's a novice, and good enough with iPhone stuff to edit. And so between what Hayden can do that's really professional, and what Danny can do that's not very far off with iPhone stuff, we've got a pretty solid team, at this point. And, you're just bootstrapping it. We're not, we're just not, a big enough company to have, a full team, yet. So.
Well, that's y'all are doing. You're pushing the industry in that direction. So, I mean, you're leading the way. You might not be what companies outside of our industry are doing, but
yeah,
very good.
Well, I appreciate
from our
that.
perspective.
I appreciate that very much. And there's things like you just learn so much. Like just sitting here talking with you guys with these headsets on and these microphones, the audio is obviously ridiculously good. And that's one of the things that, like, when people think about content creation, they think about video. Well, audio is more important. It just is. And I had no idea. But you only know that when it's bad, right?
Yes.
So like Hayden's done an extremely good job of helping us, and the part, that with Hayden that I've had to do is to encourage him to call it good enough, because like he'd want to create a masterpiece out of every piece of content.
Yeah.
I'm like, dude, I need quantity over quality. And so, and he's starting to get that, that like, listen, like even all these other nuances, like you're the only one that sees them unless it's James, right? Or, that most people aren't going to see it, so we got to find that sweet spot between like, stuff that's professional and good, but at a pretty fast clip versus like creating one piece a month or something, right? That's a masterpiece.
That's what we battle that constantly,
Mm-hmm.
And part of it is also like, where is our industry? Where's our niche at? And like, if you go so far beyond everybody else, like nobody notices that, that effort yet. Maybe it'll get there as more and more people do it, but yeah, you gotta cut it off at some point and be like, okay, at this point, I don't think anybody else is going to notice the difference.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
I have a last question before we talk about this here in a second. So if you could fast forward, I don't want to get morbid here, but if your life is near its end and you're on your deathbed and you're close to it, and you're kind of looking back, surveying your life, and you're looking at, the question comes up did I live a successful life? What would that answer? What would define successful life? What do you describe for you as being successful life?
Yeah, well, for me, I'd have to say that it has to start with honoring the one who created me, and I'm a sinful human being, so like I'm not always going to do that, but if the body of work honors, the one who created, then I'd be successful. Now, specifically, and I think the reason why, when you said it, it brought tears to my eyes, because my kids know so much about how much I love business and how much I love family. And my son sent me a clip of Jerry Jones in whatever that Yellowstone thing is, or I don't watch a lot of TV, but I think it's Yellowstone that he was on, or some, I don't remember it. No, it's the new oil show. Landman. That's what it was. So, and whoever the guy is in the hospital, and I think he's going to recover, but Jerry Jones comes in, and Jerry Jones is basically saying, listen, like, you got to change some things. You may I think you're going to get a chance, but like, you've let business completely overtake, family and life. And Jerry says basically, and I don't know Jerry Jones. I have no idea whether this is true or whether it's part of the show, but he said, I got into the oil business because I wanted to, do business with my family, with my daughter, and he goes through and articulates how he got into that because he wanted to spend time with his daughter, who was in the oil business in some way. I can't remember the details, but in watching that, and then that's what, that's truly what's changed my mind about having my kids involved in my business, is that like I want to do life with my family, and life to me is work and business and building family. And like even now, my wife's probably frustrated with me that we're not on our way to Miami, but like it is deeply intertwined, our business life and our family life, and as long as and I would say that like I've one of the reasons why I was really struggling also with the idea of doing business together with family is that a lot of times it drives families apart, and it's like, well, so why would you do that? And I think that I believe that even though it has the potential to drive families apart, it has also the potential to bring families together,
sure,
in a way that they would not be able to be together and to really, experience all of life together. And so, if at the end of my days, I can say that, I've honored the one who created me and honored my family and then built a brand that built people, and then hopefully give my children a chance to keep doing it and taking it to a whole nother level. I don't, to be honest, I don't know if any of them are capable of running a business, and I know they're really capable at certain aspects of working in the business. So maybe they can, maybe they can't. I don't really know. But like that would make me feel good if they were able to take it, and whether they can all work together or whether they can't, or whether they end up in their own business separately, I have no idea. But like those are the things that ever since God kicked Adam and Eve out of the garden, Adam had to work, and nowadays Eve does too for the most part. And so like you want to do things that can make a difference in people's lives, and you want to make an impact. And so I think we're on the path of doing that, and so I'm exceedingly thankful for that, and the opportunity to build relationships along the way. I've been exceedingly grateful for that.
Good
Thank
answer.
you.
Good answer.
Yeah.
I mean, you nailed it there as far as Adam in the garden. I think man is fulfilling his role in working, and so we get some kind of satisfaction in working because we're supposed to do that. We're supposed to be laborers on some level, and so to sit around and do nothing, it doesn't. It's you're kind of out of place, I think, unless you're out there doing something. And so I think we're supposed to toil the ground and work and fulfill where God's calling on our life to do that. But obviously the balance is to not let that work be king or take dominion and overshadow, the family or the just enjoying life aspect of it, So
I heard somebody say this, and it really kind of struck me. But if you think like, men are designed to basically spend ourselves, right? Like we're when you're working, you're spending yourself, you're spending your life for something, right? And you want it to be for the right things, but we're laying down our lives, usually providing for our family, providing for others. So I think that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. So the last thing before we close here is we like to talk about tools.
Sure.
So
you okay with that?
Yeah, I love tools.
Normally we talk about Dent Slayer tools. Usually I grab something off the wall since this is a Dent Slayer podcast. But we're going to break the rules a little bit. And we are going to talk about some Dent Slayer tools. We have this new glue here that we came out with this year, which this is a collision glue. We will have a hail glue that will be out here any month now. I mean, hopefully before hail season hits. That's kind of the goal. But we're just waiting on that. But this is available right now through Anson. This is made in conjunction with Anson. So this is our take at a collision glue. And so
you want to talk about our general philosophy behind the two glues?
So we wanted, briefly. So like when you survey the whole hot glue PDR industry, hot glue thing, I mean, it can get overwhelming. I mean, there's tons of glues and there's tons of applications for it. And so we wanted to kind of simplify, if we can, the process of understanding which glue should I grab. And so we wanted to make this is the hot climate collision glue. And then we have a cold climate hail glue. So we made it super easy. And in the application, whether or not it's hail or collision, and then in understanding of the when, which is cool climate, or the where maybe, that's better, the cool climate or hot climate. So obviously, all those can be cheated. We have lots of tricks that we use to cheat those factors, make a hot climate cold, make a cold climate hot, and you can do that with the pull times or the set times or whatever, and panel prep, and there's lots of tricks you can do to cheat those that fill in the gaps, I believe. And so we've just tried to make it super simple. We offer two glues, the hot climate collision and the cold climate hail.
But it's not just collision for hot climate, right? It's
No,
a collision glue and hail glue.
And that's what I'm saying is because there's lots of bleed over where you can
Right.
cheat those things depending upon
Right.
certain factors you address. But ultimately, though, with I would say the collision is probably the most temperamental, that the factors have to be more right, because with a hail tab, I mean, you're essentially not letting that thing sit on a car unless you walk away from the car. There's no reason to really let that thing set for more than 30 seconds at the absolute longest. I mean, like really. So you can cheat it with your pull times with your hail tabs. But with these collision tabs, I mean, we're setting these large apparatus sometimes, not this one. This one's really good size right here, but we do have other large apparatus that we're putting on these really expensive paint jobs, and they're sharp metal edges, and Kiko does a nice job of trying to protect those, but we can't get away with sometimes we having these metal edges, and they can slip and they can ruin a job that you're trying to fix. And so that's where having the right collision glue comes in, because you need it to be able to hang out there for sometimes. I mean, listen, I've set up something, you set up a system, and that could take you 20 minutes to set up everything right, get all the conditions, the panel prep and the tab prep and all these things, and set the apparatus up and measure everything and map out the dent. And then you got another system you're trying to set up after that one's there. And then you got to, okay, now I'm ready to work, and you're trying to set your heat gun up and get your light right and get the right tool with the right tip and the right leverage and all these things. And so you could be an hour sometimes before you even start applying tension to something, and that needs to be able to live there for that amount of time and not fall off in the process. And so I think collision glue is the most important, that you can't really cheat that. Right? Like you need it to hold there and to be there. And then when you do want to activate that thing with tension or a large perpendicular pull to a panel, then you need that to adhere. There's nothing worse than setting it up and you go through all that process, and then you go right to put tension on it and it just bursts. And you're like, freaking hey. And you got to pull everything off and reset everything again. So anyhow, collision glue is probably the most temperamental variable that you have to get right.
Right.
So,
and a lot of this stuff, dent guys kind of operate on instinct. We know how long it takes by feel, by experience, but like we really have looked to you guys and the body of work that you've done to know what is the temperature window of a pull. What is the proper, the ideal temperature window to operate that in? And just like knowing stuff like that, we've, y'all are the go-to for that kind of information, the 6C system, all that kind of stuff.
You've set the standard
appreciate
for the process
Yeah.
that have helped us as Dent guys. You've given us a map that we can follow to make sure that these things are successful. So there's a lot of work that you guys have done to do that. And it's become industry standard is kind of what we were getting at, is like, that's just default. It's like everyone should kind of fall back to those 6Cs that you guys established. So,
I appreciate that. I think, and I guess the genesis of that is that, looking at it, I felt like guys were trying to be subject, to variables that they weren't even trying to control. They were just throwing in the towel and saying, oh, well, I'm subject to all these variables, and so therefore I need to change my tools, glue being a tool, when, the environment changes. And so, what we've done is just created, a process window, and then how to, stay inside of that window. And, we've said, one collision glue, for 6 or 8 years basically is what, because the last thing we want somebody to think when they have a bad pull is, oh, well, maybe I need to change glues, because now they're on this, they're on this rabbit, trail that, like, they don't need to be down if they just back up and repeat the process and make sure that they keep the process intact. And, largely that's, just the proper temperatures, for, getting ready to pull, and the proper temperatures for when the pulling window, basically. Honestly, we don't get bad pulls like ever, as long as we keep that window and as long as we keep those 6Cs in mind. Like, we don't get bad pulls. Like, it doesn't happen. And so that's been, but it's still getting people to slow down and follow a process is easier said than done.
Sure.
Like I can't get the glue to stick is still the biggest problem that we have to solve, which is frustrating, but it's just a fact, and so we just keep, telling the story over and over and over again, until we get there. So I love, the collision glues. To me, that means high strength and high flexibility, because the thing about those dents is that panel, had to flex for that dent to go into that panel. And guess what? If that dent's going to come out, that panel's got to flex. The glue's got to flex with it. The tab's got to flex with it. The tab can't flex too much. It's got to have an area of rigidity to be able to create, exert some will over that dent, And so, anyway, those are things that we could talk about to a great degree. But collaborating with Anson, I think is really a smart move, because they understand glues, and collision glues. So I'm sure that's a great product. We'd be happy to have Danny try some out too and see. I'd love to use it.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of, I wanted the glues more appropriate with kind of what we do around here, and I do a lot of these big PCR jobs, so to speak. And then we obviously the hail or the wholesale ordering kind of stuff is where the other glue comes in. But yeah, this is exactly what we were looking for, and it's I've used it quite a bit. I mean, I wouldn't say I've exhausted it, but it's exceeded expectations in the times that I've used it. I used it this morning with this beam here, which is the other thing I want to talk about briefly. So I didn't have a whole lot of time at MTE. I was running around crazy, And one thing that I did want to grab at MTE was a small apparatus like this that, middle of the road kind of damage, not some crazy caved in door monster, but we have these deck lid dents or these fender dents or these body line dents that just get a nice little chop. And, I'm looking at all the apparatus that are out now to aid in tensioning this thing out. And some are too big, some are too complicated, some are, all the power that you need, but it's, you're trying to find this middle ground of small, easy to use, lightweight, but power. And so I briefly ran over to the Kiko booth. I think I went to 2 booths, Stanliner and Kiko. That's really all I could do. And I bought tools at both, but I bought this at the Kiko booth. This is the K-Power, correct?
K-Power Junior.
Junior. Yep. Mm-hmm. And I bought the tab straps, which is these little adapters that come on it here. And these essentially are the tabs that are like a strap. And they're super highly flexible here. And it locks into these adapters. And it will essentially work like a strap, but you're not getting any dive. I haven't had any dive yet. I've used it handful of times since we've been back from MTE, and I've really only used it with strap tabs, and it has worked flawlessly. It's opened up everything that I've needed it to do, and it's just the right size for the majority of the lateral tension setups that I'm doing in here. Smaller, more locked up little body line dents. This thing works good. I asked you or asked Danny. I was like, I'm going to put an impact on this, and I'm going to pull that trigger. Is this thing going to hold up? That was kind of my first thing, because, if it wasn't going to do that, then I'm probably going to pass, just to be honest.
Right.
I'll just stick with my Porta Power, which I don't have that problem. Other problems, but... So anyhow, I haven't... I've put the impact on it every time. Today was the first time actually I used a knob that came with it, just because I wanted to try it. Sometimes the impact gives you a false reading because you hear that and you don't know. You can't feel it. You can't feel. Whereas the knob, you have more of this feel. So I really wanted to be able to feel what I was doing today, and so I used the knob. And so anyhow, this thing has been. It's been. I told you earlier, it's 99% perfect in my opinion, as far as for what I'm trying to do. So congratulations on that. This thing has been awesome, and I've grabbed it almost every day since we've been back. That I've been here in my shop, and it's just been good. So if you guys don't have one, I would highly recommend looking at this for the small repairs you're doing. It's just the K-Power. You guys make a bigger one. So I messaged Danny yesterday, and I said maybe a 24-inch one.
Yeah.
Would be in order, because when you do have these tab straps on, it does, you do lose a little real estate here, but you can cheat that with cutting the tab straps down a little bit. And but this thing has been great. I would highly recommend you getting it. They do have the what's the next size up?
It's a 36 inch.
36 inch.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that'd be another one. It's exactly the same design, it's just longer, right?
That's right. Yeah. Exactly the same. So what we were seeking to do with the K-Power is, the lateral tension and tensioning has been, like we talked about earlier. It's really come into its own in the last couple of years, and so we had our LTT 36, which was basically shoes somewhat similar to what these shoes are, with an all thread in between, and we had a 3/8 all thread, which was actually not a strong enough all thread, and so when you added tension, you bowed that rod a bit and could possibly have tab dive associated with that, because again that rod is now sitting up probably 3/4 of an inch off of the panel, and then when it starts to bow, now it's cantilevering and driving those tabs in. So that was that was a problem that we had with our first generation. Then we went to a bigger diameter all thread, and it was less of a problem, but still a problem. And the whole while I'm watching what other folks have, and what was, I'd say, the most the biggest inspiration for this, and why I wanted to do it this way, is that my opinion was the best. You mentioned it earlier. The best tool was like 2 blocks of wood with a porta power in between, right? A porta power. And at that time, I was like, why is that so much better? Well, it was so much better because it's so flat to the panel. It's so close to the panel. And when you're, close to the panel and pushing straight out, you have no potential to cantilever and cause tab dive. But the problem with a porta power, I thought, were really 2 things. One, you got to build up the sections, and now you're pumping that thing up, so it's just not very user friendly to be able to get to the size you want and to the position you want very quickly. So that's horrible. So that was a big problem with a porta power. The other big part of a problem with a porta power was the same problem that our 36-inch LTT had, which was your rod is in the way of your work. So we needed something. We were setting out to create an offset porta power, basically, driven by an impact. And so that's, and being able to go flat to the panel, and then truly we had a lot of different tabs that we were using. The tab strap idea came from watching people use your polyester straps, or the nylon straps. The problem with those, I think, is that they are so thick that when you fill those with glue, you create so much latent heat on the panel while that is cooling that you have the potential. I've heard guys talk a lot about paint blush, associated with those. So it was Danny that first ground off part of the centipede and glued part of the centipede to create a tab strap for us. And now we're building molds, and now we're going to have a number of different tab straps and to be able to fold over body lines, to be able to go out toward the edge of the panel, to be able to go more inboard, all the while very close, to the panel, as close as we can get, so that we're not, potentially creating any drive, and we're getting maximum tension where we need it, and all the while being off center, so that, your work area is open. We have our thought with all the tools really is, but particularly with tensioning, is that, it needs to, that you let the tensioning tool tension, and then when you're ready to pull, you get a pulling tool for the pulling, and when you get ready to knock, you get a striking tool for the striking, right? And when you get ready to push, you get a push tool for the pushing. And if you can get all those things working in concert, better, but they need to be independent. And when you put those things together, where you're stretching and pulling simultaneously, you take it out of concert a bit, is what we believe. And so, so that was what we're doing. And of course, we needed something that could work very quickly. And we know how much unlocking those dents is going to make collision repair damage that we weren't able to fix before fixable. But we knew it needed to operate very quickly, or else guys, in the collision shop would not be interested. They wouldn't wait for it. So I think we did pull that off with the K-Power. And then almost immediately, Danny did come to me and said, "Hey, we need to make a smaller one for the PDR guys." Right. So it was, we made that smaller one because, and so then we started thinking about what size to make it, and I could see that you may be right, that there needs to be a few different sizes, right? Why not, right? In the scheme of things, it's a tool that is such a time saver, such a creates such opportunity, to make a dent go come out cleaner. You know, as you guys know, I don't fix dents for a living, but if I, you know, all of a sudden had to come in and clock in and try to fix dents for a living for you tomorrow, I've watched a lot of it done. I've toyed around with it a little bit. I would put lateral tension on almost everything because I feel like it's an absolute superpower. I mean, it's gonna, you know, the fact is, you know, once you put lateral tensions on something and just begin to strike, you know, your strikes are so much more effective. You know, anyway, that comes into a lot of strategy. But yeah, it's been a well received product in both the collision space and in the PDR space. So yeah, we're grateful that you like it and a bunch of other guys do too.
Yeah, right after I got home from MTE, I was scrolling through Instagram. I got sick right after MTE. I got sick at MTE, in case anyone noticed. But so I was on my phone a lot with them saying that right after MTE because I was sick, and so I'm going through Instagram and everybody bought this thing, and I was happy but sad. I was like, dang, I thought I was the only one to find this little cool nugget tool, but everybody bought it. So congratulations, you guys, for selling a buttload of them. I guess you sold quite a few there, but rightly so because it's a good little tool, and it's just the right size for, you know, if you're a mobile guy, if you're running around wholesale, and you're even in a retail shop here like what we have here. I mean, it's a 100%. Don't even ask. Just swipe the card, buy it, get those little tabs, and you will use it more than you think. And if you, going back to your thing, if you know metal flow, if you understand dent theory and you can understand metal flow, you'll know why you should probably use this more often than you think you should. Like you said, you'd use it almost every dent. Almost like you could justify in theory using this on every dent. So buy this thing. It hasn't. It's only impressed me to this point, and so good job with this thing.
Have y'all seen? I've seen it like the last 2 days, maybe. Where I think y'all shared it, but they're taking those adapters off and putting feet on them and spreading the inside panels out. Yeah, have you seen that?
Like the rear body panel that get crushed in.
Yeah. So we created an attachment where you put a K-bar foot on the back end of that, and then we created an attachment on the front, you know, where we can put what we call our tab track adapters, both the straight ones and the curved ones. And we knew that, you know, that was what we had. The initial thing that I had in mind there was watching people. I've been in trainings myself and done, you know, a little known fact is I actually do some of our trainings. I've done a bunch of them by myself. I don't fix dents, but I just take the guys that work there. They know how to fix dents, you know, but I know our system. And so like I just coach them through the process. And so I've done a bunch of trainings myself, and at least on 3 different occasions, I've seen guys, you know, stick a porta power inside of a wheel arch and try to straighten that inner. And on all 3 occasions that I watched somebody try to do that, they punched through the inner, you know, with the porta power because they, you know, didn't have the right kind of surface area. And it was such a struggle to be able to get the length right and all that sort of thing. So we, you know, by putting a pivoting K-bar foot on the back side of that and then a curved adapter on the front side, it is like the cleanest, quickest way to be able to straighten, you know, that wheel arch that gets caved in. So anyway, that and you know, now those rear panels and things like that, you know, those are, I will say that, like, you know, sometimes there's OEMs that would say some of that stuff that you can't do, and then there's some that would say that you can do it, and then there's like a big gray area, right? You know, so what we typically always say, or what we, you know, like the first C of our 6 C's is check, and it's check your OEM procedure, right? You know, because we don't want people doing things that would be considered unsafe by the OEM. But one thing we also know is that there are folks who have done a lot of replace in the name of safety, you know, where there is some gray area, right? You know, and so if you have, you know, cold, you know, the idea of cold straightening where you're not adding heat to a panel, that tends to be the most free game way of being able to make a repair and still be within OEM procedures. And so what we have is a cold straightening system in glue pull. Even with the hot glue, it's still underneath what is considered cold straightening. And so we've continued to create tools and accessories to those tools to allow more capability of repair. Our new mantra is not that we just have a glue pull repair system that is cleaner and less invasive, better quality. It's truly that we're unlocking repairability. With our system and our process and our training, we're creating repairability where people were only replacing before in a collision shop. So we're leaning into the fact that we're not here just to, when you decide to repair, that we want you to choose us instead of a stud welder. We're now saying, listen, you should consider repair first rather than, replace. And so we're saying this, with this system, you were able to unlock that repairability to a level it wasn't before. Now, check with your OEM procedure, because we don't want you to do anything that you shouldn't do that would be unsafe. But, fact is, OEMs will form their opinions on what's safe and what's not safe, not by whether it's repairable. It's not typically whether they can or can't repair it. It's the method that they repair it that they're concerned with, right? And so if there's a cold straightening method, many times now it becomes free game. Not always, right? So.
Awesome.
Yeah, to be able to do that without getting hydraulic fluid all over your hands and having to tow the porta power around is pretty cool.
That's the worst. That's the worst.
Yeah.
The hydraulic fluid, the oil, ugh. Necessary evil, but if I can avoid it at all costs, I will.
Yeah. I'm always so nervous. I was so putting a porta power on a panel. It's it's nerve wracking because you just don't want to drop it. You don't want it to ruin everything that you're doing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Chris, was there anything you wanted to talk about that we forgot?
I can't imagine. Yeah,
we covered a lot of ground.
Yeah, we did cover a lot of ground. It's been a lot of fun, guys. I've really appreciated the time, and you guys are easy to talk to, and it's been great conversation, and appreciate everything that you guys are doing for both the paintless dent repair industry and the collision industry, right? We're bringing those industries together, right?
Sure.
And so appreciate everything that you're doing in that respect, and also just very much appreciate how you're doing it and how you guys conduct yourselves. So that's it's impressive.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well,
thanks for making the trip. Thank
yes,
you. Big effort to get here. So
yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, tell your wife thank you
Wouldn't
too.
have missed it. Yeah. I'll let you tell her.
All right, that's it. Where can people find you?
Well, we're at www.kecotabs.com in the United States, and then we're kecotabs.co.uk in the UK. We're kecotabs.au in Australia, and we also have kecotabs.be in Belgium. A guy named Bart Gover, and we're working on a whole thing in Europe together. So anyway, that's where you can find us online.
Okay.
Yep.
James?
Dent Repair Jax on everything on the socials.
Yep. And if you're looking for me, you can go to dentslayer.com. That's where you can find any of the tools, any of the glues, any of the training, any of the podcast, or you can get a hold of me there. So dentslayer.com.
Thank you, Marcio.
Yep. Thanks, Marcio. Appreciate you as well.
Forgot you were here.
Yep. It is. See y'all next time.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Chris.
Matt Boyette. Thank you so much for being here.
She's smooth, boy.